Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I had no plans to renovate, but when the ceiling started leaking in the hallway, I needed to check the crawl space above the closet. That's when I realized the door had never opened, not even an inch, painted shut, I thought, until I scraped away the paint and found nails driven deep, bent inward as if hammered from inside. Once I got it open, the stench hit me first, not rot, something older like earth and rust. The back of the closet was deeper than it should have been, almost like a tunnel, lined with scratch marks. Long, chaotic lines across the drywall, some with dried blood still caked in the grooves. I found a small metal bowl in the far corner, half filled with teeth. Human, definitely, all molars. I haven't slept in that hallway since. The house had been mine for 7 years. 7 years of walking past that closet, using it as a storage space for winter coats and forgotten boxes. The door handle always felt loose, but I never questioned why it wouldn't turn completely. I assumed the mechanism was old, warped by humidity and time. The real estate agent had been eager to close the deal. Too eager, I realize now. She kept steering conversations away from the previous owners, mentioning only that they'd moved suddenly for work. The price was below market value, which should have raised questions, but I was desperate to buy my first home. I called my neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived on the street for decades. Her voice trembled when I described what I'd found. She invited me over for coffee, but her hands shook as she poured. She told me about the family who lived there before me, a couple with a teenage daughter who seemed withdrawn, always wearing long sleeves even in summer. The parents worked different shifts, leaving the girl alone most evenings. The neighbor remembered hearing sounds from that house, not screaming, but something worse. Rhythmic tapping, like someone working on a project late into the night. She'd assumed it was the father doing repairs. The sounds always came from the same area of the house, somewhere near the back hallway. One winter, the sounds stopped. The family left shortly after, in the middle of the night, leaving most of their belongings behind. The neighbor watched through her window as they loaded only a few suitcases into their car. The daughter sat in the back seat, staring straight ahead, never looking back at the house. I spent days researching property records, trying to trace the previous owners. Their names appeared on the deed, but every search led to dead ends. No forwarding addresses, no social media profiles, no employment records after they left. It was as if they had simply vanished. The teeth haunted me. I counted them 17 molars, each one extracted with surgical precision. No roots attached, no signs of decay. Someone had collected them carefully, almost reverently. The metal bowl was tarnished silver, engraved with initials that had been deliberately scratched out. I found a loose floorboard in the closet's extended space. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic, were dozens of photographs. They showed the same room I was standing in, but the walls were covered with writing. Dense, cramped text covering every surface, written in what looked like different handwriting styles. Some passages were in a child's scrawl, others in adult cursive. The words were mostly illegible, but I could make out fragments: apologies, confessions, desperate pleas. In one photograph, I could see a figure hunched in the corner where I'd found the bowl. The image was blurry, but the posture suggested someone very young, very small. On the back of the photo, someone had written a single word in red ink: punishment. I took the photographs to a local photography expert, hoping to enhance the images or date them. He examined them under magnification and pointed out details I'd missed. The walls in the photos showed signs of repeated painting and repainting, layers of white paint covering the writing, only for new text to appear over it. He estimated the photos were taken over several years, documenting what appeared to be an ongoing situation. The expert noticed something else, marks on the door frame in the photographs, small gouges that matched the pattern of the scratch marks I'd found. Someone had been trying to get out, clawing at the walls and door, leaving permanent evidence of their desperation. I contacted the police, but they seemed reluctant to investigate. The detective I spoke with mentioned that without a specific crime to investigate or recent evidence of harm, they couldn't justify resources for what might be artifacts from a previous family's personal situation. He suggested the teeth could be from routine dental work, the photographs merely documenting a troubled teenager's bedroom. But I knew better. The pattern of the scratches, the careful arrangement of the teeth, the photographic documentation. This wasn't random teenage angst. This was systematic. I started having conversations with other neighbors, carefully probing about their memories of the family. An older man who lived 2 houses down mentioned seeing the father in the backyard sometimes, burning papers in a metal drum. The mother would sometimes visit him, bringing coffee, but she never stayed long. He remembered thinking their family dynamic seemed strained, but he minded his own business. A woman across the street recalled a daughter asking to use her phone once, claiming theirs was broken. The girl had dialed a number but hung up before anyone answered. When asked if everything was all right, she just nodded and returned home. That was the last direct contact any neighbor had with her. The more I learned, the more certain I became that something terrible had happened in that closet. But the evidence was circumstantial. The family was gone, and I was left alone with my suspicions and a collection of disturbing artifacts. I moved out of the house. Not immediately. It took months to arrange, to find a new place, to explain to friends why I was leaving a home I'd loved. I told people about structural issues, about the leak that had started everything. I never mentioned the closet. The house sold quickly to a young couple with children. I wanted to warn them, but what would I say? That I suspected something horrible had happened there, but had no proof. That they should be careful of a closet that was now empty and unremarkable. Sometimes I drive past the house. It looks peaceful, normal. Children's toys scatter the front yard and the windows glow warmly in the evenings. But I know what's hidden in that back hallway, what secrets the walls have absorbed. The new owners don't know they're living with the ghost of someone suffering, someone who might still be out there or might be buried in some unknown place. The teeth are still in my possession. I keep them in a safe deposit box, along with the photographs and a detailed account of everything I found. I tell myself it's evidence, that someday I might need to present it to authorities. But really, I think I'm afraid to let them go, afraid that forgetting might somehow make the suffering they represent meaningless. I never learned what happened to that family, to the daughter who scratched those walls until her fingers bled. But I carry the weight of knowing that somewhere, someone got away with something unforgivable, and the only witness was a closet that finally gave up its secrets to a stranger who could do nothing but remember. Crime 2, I bought it secondhand, looked clean. No smells, no stains, but it was heavier than it should have been. I thought it had extra springs or memory foam until I rolled over one night and heard a crunch, like plastic. I cut open the seam. Layers of padding came away, then paper, then black garbage bags. Inside were stacks of photographs, people, mostly children, asleep in their beds. Some were taken from high angles, others from behind windows. Then I saw one of my apartment, my couch. My front door, my bed, all from the outside. One photo showed me brushing my hair through the bathroom window. That bathroom doesn't face the street. There's no way someone could have taken it unless they were already inside. The seller's address was still in my phone, a quiet neighborhood where every house looked the same. When I knocked, a woman answered, middle-aged, tired eyes, the kind of person you'd forget after meeting. She invited me in for coffee without asking why I'd come back. Her living room smelled like vanilla candles and something else, something medical, sharp and clean. The walls were covered with family photos, but they were all crooked, like someone had bumped into them and never straightened them back up. I noticed gaps where frames used to hang, lighter patches on the wallpaper shaped like rectangles. She poured coffee with shaking hands. When I asked about the mattress, she said her husband had died recently. Heart attack, very sudden. She was selling his things because she couldn't bear to look at them anymore. Her voice was steady, but her fingers kept touching a spot on her neck just below her ear. A nervous habit, maybe, or maybe something else. I didn't tell her about the photographs, not yet. Instead, I asked about her husband's work. Photography, she said. He developed film in the basement, had a whole darkroom set up down there. She offered to show me, but something in her tone suggested she'd rather not. We went down anyway. The basement was darker than it should have been. The windows were painted black from the inside. Red light fixtures hung from the ceiling, casting everything in a bloody glow. Chemical trays lined a long table, still filled with developer solution. The smell was overwhelming, not just chemicals, something organic underneath, something rotting. On the wall, clothespins held strips of negatives. I moved closer, squinting in the red light. The images were hard to make out, but I could see shapes. Human shapes, some lying down, some standing. All of them seemed to be taken without the subjects knowing. She watched me from the stairs, her hand gripping the railing. When I asked how long her husband had been taking photographs, she said he'd always been interested in people, liked to capture them in their natural state. Unguarded moments, she called them. The way she said it made my skin crawl. I found a magnifying glass on the table and held it over one of the negatives. The image became clearer. A bedroom, someone sleeping. The angle suggested the photographer was standing right next to the bed. I looked at another strip. Different bedroom, different person, same intimate distance. The woman cleared her throat. Time to go, she said, but I'd already seen enough to know this wasn't just about photography. These weren't artistic shots or even voyeuristic glimpses from a distance. These were surveillance photos, documentation, evidence of something much worse. I asked her when her husband had died. She gave me a specific date, then caught herself and said she meant around that time. She couldn't remember exactly. Grief, she explained, it made everything fuzzy. But I noticed how her eyes darted to a corner of the basement when she spoke. There was a trunk there, old and leather-bound, the kind of thing you'd use to store important documents. She followed my gaze and stepped between me and the trunk. That's just old family stuff, she said, nothing interesting, but her voice had changed, higher pitched, more urgent. She was moving toward the stairs, clearly wanting me to follow. I asked if I could use her bathroom before leaving. She hesitated, then nodded. Upstairs, I found the bathroom easily enough, but I also found something else. The hallway was lined with doors, and one of them was slightly open. Inside, I could see camera equipment, professional stuff, tripods, telephoto lenses, night vision attachments, more than any amateur photographer would need. When I came back downstairs, she was waiting by the front door with my coat. Ready to leave, she said, but I wasn't ready. I told her about the photographs in the mattress. Her face went white, then red, then white again. She sat down heavily in her chair and covered her face with her hands. She said she'd suspected something. Her husband had been acting strange in the months before he died, coming home at odd hours, developing film in the middle of the night, receiving phone calls that made him nervous. She tried to ask him about it, but he'd become defensive. Angry, said she was being paranoid. Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. The week before he died, he'd been working on something in the basement, something that required him to wear gloves and a mask. When she'd asked what it was, he'd said he was developing photos for a client, a special project, but she'd never seen any client come to the house. And the chemicals he was using weren't the usual photography chemicals. They smelled different, stronger. I asked if she'd seen the photos he was developing. She shook her head, but something in her expression told me she was lying. She'd seen them. She knew what her husband had been doing, and she'd chosen to stay quiet about it. The conversation continued, but I found myself studying her more closely. The way she kept touching that spot on her neck, the way her eyes would dart to the basement door, the way she spoke about her husband like he was someone she'd barely known, not like a widow grieving her partner, like someone who'd been living with a stranger. I realized then that the photographs weren't just evidence of what her husband had been doing. They were evidence of what she'd allowed to happen, what she'd ignored, what she'd enabled by staying silent. The mattress hadn't been sold to get rid of painful memories. It had been sold to get rid of evidence. Before I left, I asked her one more question. Had anyone else come looking for the mattress? Anyone asking questions about her husband's photography? She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly shook her head. But I could see the lie in her eyes. Someone else knew about the photographs. Someone else was looking for them. I drove home with the photographs in a box on my passenger seat. Evidence of crimes I couldn't yet understand. Pictures of victims who might not even know they were victims. And somewhere out there, someone who was probably looking for exactly what I'd found. The woman's story didn't add up. Her husband's sudden death, her eagerness to sell his belongings, her knowledge of photography equipment she claimed to know nothing about. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she wasn't just the widow of a criminal. She was an accomplice. But I also realized something else. The photographs in my apartment had been taken after her husband's death, which meant either he wasn't really dead or someone else had continued his work. Someone who knew where I lived, someone who'd been watching me since I bought that mattress. I never went back to that house. I never called the police, because I couldn't shake the feeling that reporting those photographs would put me in more danger than keeping them hidden. Someone out there was still taking pictures, still watching, still documenting. And they knew I had their collection. Crime 3, I knew the attic had a weird shape, but I chalked it up to the roof slope. Then I noticed something. The floorboards didn't line up on the left side. There was a space, maybe a few feet wide, completely sealed off. I knocked. It was hollow. Took me hours, but I pried through. Behind the wall was a door with no knob, just a keyhole and something scratched into the wood. A spiral. I forced it open with a crowbar. Inside, a tiny room covered in newspaper clippings, all of them about missing people. Some of them had red string connecting names I couldn't read. In the center of the room, a single chair facing a mirror. On the chair, a recorder was still running. I pressed play. It said my address. The voice wasn't mine. It was older, gravelly, like someone who'd been smoking for decades. The recording was static-filled, but clear enough to make out every word. The voice recited my address, then my neighbors, then the house 3 blocks down where the college student used to live before she vanished. I knew about her because the whole neighborhood talked about it. Police came by asking questions, but nothing ever came of it. I rewound the tape. The voice started again, this time reciting different addresses. All of them familiar, all of them connected to people who had disappeared over the past few years. People whose faces I recognized from the newspaper clippings plastered on every surface of this hidden room. The red string wasn't random. It was a map, a pattern I was only beginning to understand. The smell in the room was wrong, not musty like old attics usually are, but something sharper. medicinal almost, like the antiseptic they use in hospitals, but mixed with something else I couldn't place. Something organic and unsettling. The more I breathed it in, the more my hands started to shake. I pulled one of the newspaper clippings from the wall. The paper was yellowed but not ancient. The headline read about a missing jogger who disappeared from the park downtown. I remembered her case because she was the same age as my sister. The article mentioned she was last seen wearing a blue running jacket. I stared at the photo for a long time. There was something about her eyes that seemed familiar, but I couldn't place where I might have seen her before. The mirror in front of the chair was positioned at an odd angle. When I sat down, I could see not just my reflection, but also the doorway behind me and part of the hidden room's entrance. Someone had been watching. Someone had been sitting in this exact spot, recording, observing, planning. The chair's fabric was worn smooth in the center, as if someone had spent countless hours here. I found more recordings stacked beneath the chair, dozens of them, each labeled with dates that spanned back several years. The handwriting was neat, methodical. I picked one at random and pressed play. The same gravelly voice, but this time describing routines, walking patterns, work schedules, the mundane details of people's lives spoken like scientific observations. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister asking if I was still coming to dinner. I looked at the message, then at the recordings, then at the newspaper clippings. One of them featured a woman who looked remarkably similar to my sister. Same hair color, same build, same habit of jogging in the early morning before work. The similarity was too precise to be coincidental. I started pulling down more clippings, searching for connections I might have missed. The missing college student had lived 3 houses down from where I grew up as a child. The jogger worked at the same company where my first girlfriend had her internship. The elderly man who disappeared from the grocery store parking lot was a regular at the coffee shop where I used to study. Every single person had crossed paths with my life somehow, even if I hadn't realized it at the time. The recordings told a different story than the newspapers. While the articles focused on the searches, the investigations, the grieving families, the tapes revealed something else entirely. They contained details that never made it to the press, details about what these people were doing in their final days, who they spoke to, where they went, information that could only come from someone who had been watching them closely. I found a manila envelope tucked behind the mirror. Inside were photographs, not newspaper photos, but personal ones, candid shots taken from a distance. People walking to their cars, sitting in restaurants, standing in their kitchens visible through windows. The photos were organized chronologically, showing the same routine surveillance that the recordings documented. Each person had been watched for weeks, maybe months, before they disappeared. The handwriting on the envelope was the same as the recording labels, but there was something else written in a different pen. A note that simply said Phase 2 with an arrow pointing to a section of photos I hadn't examined yet. These were different. Instead of surveillance shots, they showed empty houses, vacant apartments, abandoned cars, the aftermath, the spaces these people left behind. I sat back in the chair and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The angle forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding. Every person in these photos, every missing individual documented in this room, shared one thing in common besides their disappearance. They all looked like people I cared about. The jogger looked like my sister. The college student had my girlfriend's smile. The elderly man had my father's walk. Someone had been collecting people who resembled the important figures in my life. The most recent recording was dated just days ago. I played it with trembling fingers. The gravelly voice was different this time, younger, clearer. It took me several minutes to recognize what I was hearing, but when I did, my blood went cold. The voice was mine, not exactly as I knew it, but close enough to be unmistakable. The recording was of me talking to my sister about dinner plans, a conversation we'd had over the phone just yesterday. I searched frantically through the remaining materials. Hidden beneath the last stack of recordings, I found a key that fit the door I'd forced open. Someone had wanted me to find this room, but they'd also wanted to make sure I had to work for it. The scratched spiral on the door wasn't random graffiti. It was a signature, a calling card left by someone who knew I'd eventually look up and notice the misaligned floorboards. The final envelope contained something that made my hands stop shaking and my breathing slow to almost nothing. It was a deed to the house. Not the deed I'd signed when I bought the place, but an older one. A previous ownership document with a name I recognized. It was my father's signature, dated 20 years ago. My father, who told me he'd never own property in this neighborhood. My father, who'd encouraged me to buy this specific house because it was such a good deal. I called him. The phone rang several times before he answered, and when he did, his voice had that same gravelly quality I'd been hearing on the recordings. He asked me what I'd found in the attic, as if he'd been expecting my call, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for years. He didn't sound surprised. He didn't ask me to explain. He just listened to my silence and then told me to come home for dinner. The same dinner my sister had texted me about. I'm sitting in this chair now, looking at my reflection, trying to understand what I've discovered. The people in the newspapers weren't random victims. They were practice, test runs for something larger, something that involved my family, my relationships, my entire life. Someone had been preparing for years, studying the people I loved by taking others who looked like them. And now they were ready for the real thing. The recorder is still running. I can hear it capturing my breathing, my movements, the sound of my voice as I try to piece together a truth that feels too large and too terrible to fully comprehend. Someone wanted me to find this room. They wanted me to understand the pattern. They wanted me to know that everything I thought was coincidence was actually careful planning. I should call the police. I should run. I should warn my sister and confront my father and demand answers to questions I'm not sure I want answered. But instead, I'm sitting here, staring at my reflection, wondering if the person looking back at me is the same person who climbed up to the attic this morning. Wondering if I'm the next phase of someone's plan, or if I've been part of it all along. The tape is still recording, waiting for me to decide what comes next. Crime 4, it started as a flicker, my shadow turning a second too late. I thought I was overtired, but then it got worse. I'd wave with one hand, the shadow would raise the other. I'd turn my head, it would stay still. I took pictures, but they came out normal. I recorded video, it glitched only when I moved. I asked my landlord about strange wiring or interference. He said there were no cameras, no two-way mirrors, that the last tenant broke the lace and disappeared. I checked the walls, the floor, the ceiling, looking for projectors, tricks, anything. Then one night, my shadow started moving before I did, and every time I look at it now, it stands just a little closer. The landlord's words kept echoing in my head as I sat in the dim light of my apartment. The previous tenant had vanished without warning, leaving behind only scattered belongings and unpaid rent. I found myself wondering what kind of person abandons everything overnight. The kind who sees shadows that don't obey the laws of physics, perhaps. I started keeping a journal, documenting every instance when my reflection on the wall behaved independently. The entries grew longer, more detailed, more desperate. My handwriting became erratic as I tried to capture the exact moment when my shadow would lag behind or move ahead of my gestures. I sketched the positions, measured angles with a ruler, photographed the empty walls in daylight to prove no hidden mechanisms existed. The building superintendent, a weathered man with calloused hands, let me examine the apartment's history when I pressed him with questions. The lease applications were thin, incomplete. The previous tenant had listed no emergency contacts, no references, just a name that seemed too generic to be real. The security deposit had been paid in cash. The rent, always delivered by hand in unmarked envelopes, slipped under the office door. I discovered something else in those files. 3 tenants before me had broken their leases early, all within the same unit, all citing personal emergencies that required immediate relocation. The pattern stretched back years, a succession of people who couldn't stay long enough to call this place home. My investigation led me to the building's maintenance records. Water damage from a burst pipe had required extensive repairs to my unit several years ago. The walls had been stripped down to the studs, new electrical wiring installed, fresh drywall put up, but the work had been done by a contractor who'd since closed his business. No one could explain why the job had taken twice as long as estimated, or why the final invoice included charges for materials not listed in the original quote. I started visiting the local hardware store where the contractor had supposedly purchased supplies. The elderly owner remembered him vaguely, described him as nervous, always paying cash, asking unusual questions about reflective surfaces and light refraction. He bought mirrors, one-way glass, unusual lighting fixtures, items that didn't match typical renovation work. The breakthrough came when I found a loose floorboard near the window. Underneath, wrapped in plastic, was a small notebook filled with cramped handwriting. The pages documented observations similar to mine, shadows behaving independently, movements that preceded the person casting them. But these notes were older, the ink faded, the paper yellowed with age. The handwriting belonged to someone who'd lived in this apartment before the renovation. Someone who'd noticed the same phenomena I was experiencing now. The final entries became increasingly frantic, describing shadows that not only moved independently but began to interact with objects in the room. A shadow hand reaching for doorknobs before the real hand moved. A shadow figure standing when the person remained seated. The last entry was barely legible, written in what appeared to be trembling letters. It mentioned a discovery behind the bathroom mirror, something that explained everything but changed nothing. The person who wrote those words had planned to leave that night, to abandon the apartment and never return, but there was no record of them ever moving out officially. No forwarding address, no final rent payment, no key return to the landlord. I pried the bathroom mirror from the wall with shaking hands. Behind it, I found a small camera, its lens pointing into the room, but this wasn't some simple surveillance device. The camera was connected to a projector hidden in the ceiling, both pieces of equipment modified in ways I couldn't understand. Wires ran behind the walls to locations throughout the apartment, creating a network that could capture my movements and display them with subtle delays or alterations. But who had installed this system and why? The contractor's records had been destroyed when his business closed. The building's management company had changed hands multiple times, each transition conveniently erasing institutional memory. I was left with equipment that shouldn't exist, serving a purpose I couldn't fathom. I traced the electrical connections, following wires that led to a central hub hidden behind a false wall in the closet. The hub contained recording equipment, storage devices filled with footage of previous tenants. Hours of video showing people living their daily lives, unaware they were being watched, their movements captured and manipulated to create the shadow phenomenon. The recordings revealed something more disturbing than simple surveillance. Each tenant had been systematically broken down by the shadow manipulation, their sense of reality eroded until they fled in terror. But the cameras had captured something else, something the person operating this system hadn't expected. In the final days before each tenant's departure, their behavior changed dramatically. They became paranoid, suspicious, dangerous. The last recording showed the tenant before me confronting someone off camera. The conversation was muffled, but the tension was clear. The tenant accused the unseen person of stalking, of psychological torture, of destroying their sanity for entertainment. The recording ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if the equipment had been suddenly shut off. I realized that whoever had created this elaborate system of psychological manipulation was still operating it. They had access to my apartment, to the building, to the recordings of my daily life. They knew I'd discovered their equipment, knew I was unraveling their methods. The shadow manipulation had stopped, but I understood now that it had never been about the shadows themselves. It had been about control, about studying human behavior under stress, about pushing people to their breaking point and documenting the results. My landlord's nervous behavior suddenly made sense. His evasive answers, his reluctance to discuss previous tenants, his insistence that nothing unusual had ever happened in the building. He wasn't just complicit, he was actively participating in whatever psychological experiment was being conducted here. I sit now in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of a systematic campaign of psychological manipulation. The shadow projections have stopped, but I know I'm still being watched. The cameras are still recording, still documenting my reactions to discovering the truth. I've become another subject in someone's twisted research project, another data point in their study of human psychological limits. The previous tenants didn't just leave because they were frightened by moving shadows. They left because they understood what I'm beginning to understand now. The shadows were just the beginning. The real horror isn't supernatural phenomena or unexplained mysteries. It's the knowledge that someone has been deliberately destroying people's sense of reality, one tenant at a time, for years. I've documented everything I've found, photographed every piece of equipment, copied every recording. But I know that evidence means nothing if the people responsible have enough influence to cover their tracks, to erase records, to make problems disappear. The pattern will continue after I'm gone, with the next tenant and the one after that. My shadow moves normally now, obedient to the laws of physics once again. But every time I see it on the wall, I'm reminded that reality can be manipulated, that trust can be weaponized, and that the most frightening monsters are the ones who hide behind ordinary faces and legitimate businesses. The question that haunts me isn't how they created the shadow effect, or even why they chose to torment innocent people. The question is how many other apartments in how many other buildings contain similar equipment. How many people have fled their homes, convinced they were losing their minds, never knowing they were victims of deliberate psychological assault. I packed my belongings just like the tenants before me. But unlike them, I know the truth. The shadows were never the real threat. The real danger is the person who created them, who's still out there, still watching, still collecting data on human psychological breaking points. And I'm fairly certain they already know I'm planning to leave. Crime 5 found the ad online. No photos, just an address and a contact form. The rent was low, too low. I sent a message, got an email with a contract. No ID, no questions asked. I moved in that week. The place looked abandoned, dust in the corners, dead bugs under the windows, but the plumbing worked, the fridge was cold, and the bedroom was made, perfectly made, sheets ironed, pillows fluffed. I didn't make that bed. I didn't touch it for days. Then one morning I woke up on it. Fully dressed, boots on, hands folded across my chest like I'd been laid out. There was dirt under my nails and fresh footprints in the living room that didn't match mine. I started keeping a journal after that, writing down everything, what I ate, where I went, when I slept. The entries helped me piece together patterns I couldn't see before, gaps in memory that felt like missing puzzle pieces. I'd write about going to bed in the living room and waking up elsewhere, about finding dishes I didn't remember washing, perfectly clean and stacked. The basement door stayed locked. I tried every key on the ring the landlord left me. None worked, but sometimes I'd hear sounds from down there, not footsteps exactly, more like something heavy being dragged across concrete. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. The sound would stop the moment I touched the wood. My neighbor across the street watched me through her curtains, an older woman with silver hair who never waved back when I tried to be friendly. One afternoon, I walked over and knocked. She opened the door just wide enough to show half her face. "You're living in that house," she said, not a question. "Yes, I moved in last month." She studied my face like she was memorizing it. The last person who lived there left suddenly, middle of winter, left everything behind, furniture, clothes, food in the fridge. Police came by asking questions, but they stopped coming after a while. "What kind of questions?" "About the sounds, about the smell that would drift over some mornings, sweet and wrong like flowers left too long in water." She stepped back into her house. "I don't sleep well anymore, neither will you." The smell hit me that night, thick and cloying, filling every room like it was seeping through the walls. I searched for the source, but found nothing obvious. No rotting food, no dead animals, no blocked drains, just that sickly sweetness that made my stomach turn. I started researching the property online. Public records showed the house had been sold and resold multiple times over the past decade, never staying in one family's hands for more than a few months. The prices were always below market value, sometimes drastically so, like people were desperate to get rid of it. The local newspaper archives revealed more, missing person reports that mentioned this street, not the exact address, but close enough to make me uncomfortable. Young adults mostly, people who'd moved to the area recently, who didn't have deep roots or many connections, people like me. One article stood out, a woman my age who disappeared 6 months earlier. The police had questioned residents on every street in the neighborhood, including mine. They'd searched several houses, but according to the records, this house had been listed as vacant during that time. I called the number on my lease agreement, the same number I'd used to arrange the rental. It went straight to a voicemail box that was full. I tried the email address. The message bounced back, address not found. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table reading through my journal entries, looking for patterns, dates when I'd felt disoriented, times when I'd found things moved or cleaned. A schedule emerged, every few weeks like clockwork, always starting with that smell. The basement door was open when I woke up. I stood at the top of the stairs, flashlight in hand, staring down into the darkness. The smell was stronger here, much stronger. I took one step down, then another. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight. At the bottom, my flashlight beam swept across a concrete floor that looked freshly scrubbed. Tools hung neatly on the wall, shovels, rakes, things I couldn't identify in the shadows. A workbench ran along one side, clean and organized, too clean, like someone had just finished using it. In the far corner sat a chest freezer, humming quietly. I approached it slowly, every instinct telling me to turn around and leave. My hand trembled as I lifted the lid. Empty, but the interior was spotless, like it had been cleaned with bleach. Recent cleaning from the chemical smell that made my eyes water. I noticed scratches on the inside walls, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made by something sharp or desperate. I found the rental listings when I got back upstairs. Multiple websites all showing the same house, same address, same low rent, posted under different names, different contact information, but the writing style was identical. The same phrases, the same casual tone that had drawn me in. New listings appeared weekly, always targeting people who wouldn't be missed right away. Students between semesters, workers relocating for temporary jobs, People running from something, looking for a fresh start in a place where nobody knew their name. I was supposed to be the next listing. The realization hit me like cold water. The perfectly made bed, the gaps in my memory, the basement that stayed locked until I was ready to find it. Someone had been preparing me, studying my habits, waiting for the right moment. I packed everything I owned into 2 bags and left that night. Drove until I found a motel where I could pay cash and not answer questions. I kept the journal, kept the lease agreement, kept every piece of evidence I could gather. But I never went to the police. Who would believe a story about a house that rented itself, about a landlord who didn't exist, about someone who had been living in my home, watching me sleep, cleaning up after themselves like a ghost? The house is still listed online. I check sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. Different contact information now, but the same description, the same too low rent, the same careful words designed to attract people like me. People who won't be missed for a while. I wonder about the others, the ones who answered those ads before me. Did they find the basement door open too? Did they make it out, or are they still there somewhere, perfectly preserved in someone else's freezer? I wonder if the person who's been watching me is still watching, still waiting, still hoping I'll come back to finish what we started. The worst part is the doubt, the question that keeps me awake in cheap motels and borrowed beds. What if I didn't escape? What if this is all part of the plan? What if I'm still in that house, still in that basement, and everything since has been the kind of dream you have when you're running out of air? Sometimes I wake up with dirt under my nails again. Sometimes I smell those flowers, sweet and wrong, drifting through the window of whatever room I'm renting. Sometimes I catch myself researching rental properties online, looking for places with low rent and no questions asked. The house was never listed, but I signed a lease. And maybe, in some way that matters more than I want to admit, I never really left. Crime 6, the shelf leaned oddly against the wall. It wasn't flush. I pushed it aside to fix it and saw the drywall flex inward slightly, like something inside was pressing back. I thought maybe pipes or air ducts, but when I touched the wall it was warm and it pulsed like a heartbeat. I drilled a small hole and slid in a borescope camera. On the screen I saw insulation, then nothing, just blackness, then movement. Something skin-colored slipped past the lens, too quickly to identify. I yanked the camera out and filled the hole, but now every time I pass that shelf I feel the warmth again, stronger, hungrier. That discovery happened 3 weeks after I inherited the house from my neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived alone for decades. She died peacefully in her sleep, the coroner said, natural causes. The house came to me because I had been the only person who checked on her regularly, bringing groceries and helping with repairs. She had no family left. I decided to renovate before selling. The place felt heavy with years of solitude, filled with the musty scent of old fabric and neglect. When I began clearing out her belongings, I found stacks of newspapers dating back 40 years, all folded to the same section, missing persons. Yellow highlighter marked dozens of faces, young women mostly, all with similar features, dark hair, slight build, the same build as the woman who used to live here. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she had volunteered with victim advocacy groups. Maybe she kept the clippings to remember the forgotten. But as I worked through her possessions, patterns emerged that made my hands shake. In her bedroom closet, behind winter coats that smelled like mothballs and fear, I found a shoebox. Inside were driver's licenses, 7 of them, all belonging to different women, but the photographs could have been sisters. The names meant nothing to me, but their faces haunted my sleep. I researched each name online. All had been reported missing over the past 15 years. All had disappeared without explanation. The logical part of my mind screamed to call the authorities, but something held me back. The woman I knew had been frail and kind. She baked cookies for neighborhood children and fed stray cats. She couldn't hurt anyone. There had to be another explanation. I kept working on the house, but my focus shifted. Every room became a potential crime scene in my mind. I examined floorboards for stains, checked walls for hidden spaces, searched the basement for disturbed earth. The house revealed nothing obvious, but my paranoia grew with each passing day. Then I found the journal. It was tucked inside a hollowed-out cookbook, written in her careful handwriting. The entries began innocuously enough, discussing her garden and the weather, but gradually the tone shifted. She wrote about watching people through her windows. She described their routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. She knew when they came home, when they left, who visited them. One entry made my blood freeze. She reminds me of myself at that age, so trusting. She always leaves her back door unlocked when she goes for evening walks. It would be so easy. The date matched the disappearance of one of the women from the driver's licenses. I should have stopped reading, but I couldn't. Page after page revealed a mind that had twisted solitude into something predatory. She wrote about conversations she'd had with these women, how she'd gained their trust by appearing helpless and elderly. She described inviting them over for tea, offering them help with their own problems. But the entries never explicitly confessed to murder. They hinted and circled around acts of violence without ever stating them directly. The writing became increasingly fragmented toward the end, as if she was losing her grip on reality or deliberately obscuring her crimes. The final entry was dated the day before she died. They're getting suspicious. The young man next door asks too many questions. He's been watching me just like I watch others. But I'm tired now, so very tired. Let him find what he finds. The wall knows everything I've done. That's when I understood why the bookshelf had felt wrong, why the wall behind it pulsed with unnatural warmth. I hadn't imagined the movement I'd seen through the camera. Something was inside that wall, someone. I spent sleepless hours deciding what to do. Each scenario I considered seemed worse than the last. If I called the police and they found bodies, I would be connected to a serial killer by inheritance and proximity. If I remained silent, I would be complicit in covering up multiple murders. But when I finally gathered the courage to drill another hole, this time larger, the smell that emerged made me vomit immediately. Sweet decay mixed with something chemical, like formaldehyde. I sealed the hole quickly and left the house. For days I couldn't return, but eventually I had to. I had responsibilities, paperwork to complete, decisions to make about the property. When I entered, the smell was gone. The wall felt cool and normal. The bookshelf sat flush against it, as if it had never been disturbed. I convinced myself I had imagined everything. Grief and stress had created delusions. The driver's licenses could have been keepsakes from volunteer work. The journal entries could have been creative writing exercises or the fantasies of a lonely mind. The smell could have been a dead animal in the walls. But late one evening, while boxing up the last of her belongings, I heard something that shattered my denial. A soft tapping from inside the wall. Not random settling noises, but rhythmic, deliberate, like someone trying to communicate. I pressed my ear against the drywall and listened. The tapping continued, following a pattern I almost recognized. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. It repeated over and over, growing weaker with each repetition until it finally stopped. I never called the police. Instead, I finished packing quickly and put the house on the market as is. I told the real estate agent there might be minor structural issues that buyers should investigate thoroughly. I priced it low enough to sell fast. The house sold within a week to a young couple who planned to renovate extensively. I wanted to warn them, to tell them to check the walls carefully. But what could I say without implicating myself in something I still wasn't entirely sure I understood? Sometimes I drive past the house and see lights in the windows, evidence of normal life continuing. I wonder if the new owners found anything. I wonder if they heard the tapping. I wonder if they had the courage to look deeper than I did. But mostly I wonder whether my elderly neighbor was truly the monster her journal suggested, or whether something else entirely lived in those walls. Something that had been feeding on her guilt and isolation for years, growing stronger with each secret she kept. The truth is, I'll never know for certain what happened in that house, but I learned something about myself during those weeks of discovery and denial. I learned that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary self-deception when faced with horrors too large to comprehend. I learned that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we choose not to see. Crime 7, they moved in across the hall last week. Same haircut, same height, same laugh. I didn't think much of it until I saw what they were wearing. It was my old jacket, the one I lost in a move years ago. Then I noticed their dog looked exactly like mine. Same scar on the paw, same collar. I knocked on their door, tried to introduce myself. They stared at me like I was the stranger. I caught a glimpse inside their apartment. It was identical to mine, same rug, same furniture, same crooked photo on the wall. The only difference, they had a framed photo of me, sleeping. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, replaying what I'd seen. The photograph haunted me. When had someone taken it? I remembered the jacket, a vintage leather piece I'd bought at a thrift store. It vanished during my last move, along with several other items I'd assumed the movers had lost. But seeing it again, worn by someone who could pass for my twin, made my skin crawl. The next morning I watched through my peephole as they left for work. They walked with my gait, carried my old messenger bag, even had the same nervous habit of adjusting their collar. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close, then stepped into the hallway. The silence felt thick, oppressive. I pressed my ear to their door and heard nothing. That afternoon, I decided to investigate. I started with my building's rental office, claiming I wanted to welcome the new tenant properly. The property manager, a tired woman with coffee-stained fingers, pulled up the file without suspicion. The lease was signed by someone with my exact name. Not similar, identical. Same middle initial, same unusual spelling of my last name. But the signature looked different, shakier somehow. I asked to see the application. The social security number was wrong by 1 digit. The emergency contact was listed as my mother, but the phone number was outdated. The landline she disconnected after my father died. Someone had done their homework, but not perfectly. Walking back to my apartment, I noticed things I'd overlooked before. The hallway carpet showed where patterns leading to both our doors, as if someone had been walking this route much longer than a week. There were scratches around their door lock, the kind that come from fumbling with keys in the dark, but the metal looked aged, not fresh. I called my mother that evening, trying to sound casual. Had anyone contacted her recently, asked about me? She paused, then mentioned a strange call from someone claiming to be updating emergency contact information for my apartment building. She'd given them my old address, the one from before my last move. The caller had asked detailed questions about my habits, my schedule, my pets. My dog whined from the kitchen where I'd been feeding him. I looked at him closely for the first time in months. The scar on his paw, the one I'd always assumed came from a puppy accident, looked deliberate now. Too clean, too precise, like someone had made it. That night I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, deliberate movements that stopped right outside my door. I checked the peephole but saw nothing. The footsteps resumed, then faded toward the other apartment. I waited until silence returned, then opened my door carefully. On the floor was a small envelope with my name written in my own handwriting. Inside was a photograph of me from last summer, taken at a restaurant I'd visited alone. I remembered that day I'd been celebrating a promotion, treating myself to dinner, but I'd sat at a corner table, back to the wall. This photo was taken from directly across from me, as if someone had been sitting there the entire time. In the background, barely visible, was a figure wearing my lost jacket. I started keeping a journal, documenting every interaction, every strange coincidence. The neighbors' schedule mirrored mine perfectly. When I left for work, they left. When I returned, they were already back. I began varying my routine, leaving at different times, taking different routes. They adapted seamlessly. One morning, I found my spare key missing from its hiding spot in the hallway fire extinguisher box. I'd kept it there for emergencies in a small magnetic case tucked behind the metal bracket. The case was gone entirely. I changed my locks that afternoon, but the locksmith mentioned something unsettling. The old lock showed signs of frequent use by a key that wasn't quite the right fit. Someone had been forcing it to work. I installed a small camera in my peephole, one that recorded to my phone. The footage revealed my neighbor standing outside my door for long periods, sometimes for hours. They would press their ear to the door, then mimic sounds from inside my apartment. When I played music, they would hum along. When I spoke on the phone, they would mouth the words. The property manager called me back a few days later. She'd been going through old files and found something strange. There was another lease application from 6 months ago, also in my name, for the same apartment number I now occupied. But according to their records, I'd been living there for over a year. Someone had tried to rent my apartment while I was already living in it. I confronted my neighbor directly. I knocked on their door, and when they answered, I demanded to know who they were. They smiled my smile and invited me in. The apartment was exactly like mine, down to the placement of books on shelves and the brand of coffee in the kitchen. But everything was slightly wrong. The books were the same titles but different editions. The coffee was the same brand but a different blend. It was as if someone had tried to recreate my life from memory and gotten the details just slightly off. They offered me tea in a mug identical to one I'd broken months ago. As I held it, I noticed my hands were shaking. They watched me with intense curiosity, as if studying my reactions. When I asked about the photograph, they claimed not to know what I meant, but I could see it on their mantle, in the same frame, in the same spot. I left without drinking the tea. That night I barely slept. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed of being watched, of someone cataloging my every movement. I woke to the sound of my own voice coming from the hallway. My neighbor was playing a recording of me talking on the phone, the conversation I'd had with my mother about the strange caller. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in my handwriting, but I hadn't written it. It said, "I've been waiting so long to meet you. Thank you for finally noticing me." The paper smelled like my cologne, the one I'd run out of weeks ago. I realized then that I'd been looking at this wrong. This wasn't someone trying to steal my identity or copy my life. This was someone who'd been living my life longer than I had, and I was the intruder. The application from 6 months ago, the wear patterns in the carpet, the aged scratches on the lock, they'd been here first. I checked my own lease again, really examined it this time. The signature looked different from how I remembered signing it. The date seemed wrong, and at the bottom, in small print, was a clause I'd never noticed. Tenant acknowledges they are assuming residence from previous occupant with identical identification. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know which one of us is real. When I look in the mirror, I see their face looking back. When I speak, I hear their voice. My memories feel borrowed, like someone else's experiences I've convinced myself are mine. The photograph of me sleeping sits on my own mantle now. I don't remember putting it there. I don't remember taking it down from their apartment. But there it is, watching me as I write this, and I'm starting to think it was always mine to begin with. Crime 8, I got the key, went to open it. The manager said it had been vacant for months. When I opened the roll-up door, the smell hit immediately. Not rot, just old, damp. The unit was filled with filing cabinets, all unlabeled. I opened one. Inside were hundreds of envelopes. Each one had a photo, a person, each one labeled with a location and a note. Last seen near gas station. Did not return to work. Car found but body missing. I flipped through dozens, then I saw mine. Same face, same scar, different clothes. Underneath the photo, the note said, "Still unaware." My hands went cold. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I stood there in that cramped space, fluorescent light buzzing overhead, trying to process what I was seeing. My own face staring back at me from a photograph I'd never posed for. The scar above my left eyebrow, the one I got falling off my bike as a kid, clearly visible. But the clothes were wrong. I'd never owned that jacket. I set the envelope aside and kept digging through the files. Each cabinet seemed to hold a different category. Missing persons, unsolved cases, people who simply vanished without explanation. The photos were candid shots taken from a distance. Security camera footage printed out, surveillance photos. Someone had been watching all these people before they disappeared. The deeper I went, the more systematic it became. Each file contained detailed notes about routines, habits, weaknesses. One woman's file mentioned she always walked the same route home from her evening shift. Another man's file noted he lived alone and rarely had visitors. The handwriting was neat, methodical, patient. I found a small cassette recorder buried under a stack of manila folders. The batteries were old but still worked. I pressed play. A voice I didn't recognize began speaking in measured tones about observation techniques, about how to remain invisible while tracking someone's daily patterns. The speaker discussed patience as a virtue, how sometimes you had to watch for weeks before the right opportunity presented itself. My throat felt dry. I ejected the tape and found others. Dozens of them, each labeled with initials that didn't match any names. I played another one. This time the voice was describing someone's workplace schedule, their lunch habits, the exact bench they sat on in the park during their break. The level of detail was disturbing, intimate. I kept searching, hoping to find some explanation that would make sense of everything. In the bottom drawer of the last cabinet, I discovered a leather journal. The entries dated back years. The handwriting matched the notes on the photo files. The first entry was simple. Started watching today. Subject unaware of surveillance. As I read through the journal, a pattern emerged. The writer would select someone, study them for weeks or months, document their every move, and then they would simply vanish. The journal entries would stop abruptly with each person. No explanation of what happened to them, just silence. The entries were clinical, detached. The writer referred to people as subjects, as cases to be solved or puzzles to be completed. There was no emotion in the descriptions, no indication of what ultimately happened to these individuals, just cold observation followed by nothing. I flipped to the most recent entries. My stomach dropped. The handwriting described someone who worked at an office building downtown, someone who bought coffee from the same shop every morning, someone who always parked in the same spot. The description was me. Down to the specific coffee shop, the parking space, even the time I usually arrived at work. The final entry was dated just 2 weeks ago. Subject maintains predictable routine. No close relationships that would immediately notice absence. Lives alone. Perfect candidate for next phase. My hands were shaking now. I looked around the storage unit with new eyes. This wasn't random junk someone had abandoned. This was an archive, a collection, someone's life work cataloging people who would eventually disappear. I grabbed my photo and the journal, stuffed them into my jacket, and started backing toward the door. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner, partially hidden behind one of the filing cabinets, was a small table. On it sat a camera with a telephoto lens pointed directly at the storage unit entrance. The red recording light was blinking. I ran, left the unit door open, left everything scattered on the floor, and ran to my car. My hands fumbled with the keys as I tried to start the engine. In my rearview mirror, I could see the storage facility manager walking toward the open unit, probably wondering why I'd left in such a hurry. That was a month ago. I haven't been able to sleep properly since. I keep thinking about that journal, about all those people who were being watched without knowing it. I think about the systematic way their disappearances were documented. I wonder how many others are out there, going about their daily routines, completely unaware they're being studied like specimens. I've changed my routine completely. Different coffee shop, different route to work, different parking space. I look over my shoulder constantly. Every person with a camera makes me nervous. Every car that seems to follow the same path as mine gets my attention. But here's what really haunts me. I keep wondering about that storage unit. Did I really stumble onto it by accident? The manager said it had been vacant for months, but that camera was running. Someone was expecting it to be opened. Someone wanted those files to be found. Maybe I wasn't randomly assigned that unit. Maybe someone wanted me to see my own photo, to know I was being watched. Maybe this is all part of the pattern I read about in that journal. The systematic documentation of someone's life before they disappear. I've thought about going to the authorities, but what would I tell them? That I found some files and photos, that someone might be watching people. The storage facility manager would probably just say I was confused, that maybe the previous renter left some personal belongings behind. And there's something else that bothers me, something I haven't been able to shake since that day. When I looked at my photo in that file, when I saw that note saying still unaware, I had this strange feeling of recognition. Not of the photo itself, but of the handwriting. The careful, methodical script looked familiar somehow. I've been going through my own things, looking for examples of handwriting to compare. Old notes, grocery lists, anything I might have written down. I found a journal I kept years ago, back when I was going through a difficult period in my life. The handwriting looked different then, more hurried, less controlled. But there were a few entries toward the end, written during a time I don't clearly remember. The handwriting in those entries looked remarkably similar to what I found in that storage unit. Neat, methodical, patient. I don't know what to make of that. Memory is a funny thing. Sometimes we forget periods of our lives, especially during times of stress or trauma. Sometimes we do things we don't fully remember doing. The storage unit is still there. I drive by it sometimes just to see if anything has changed. The door is always closed now. The manager probably cleaned everything out and re-rented it to someone else. Maybe someone who genuinely needs storage space. Maybe someone who will never find what I found. Or maybe someone who is supposed to find it. Maybe that's how this works. Maybe the cycle continues with each new person who gets handed that key and told the unit has been vacant for months. I still have that photo of myself. I keep it in my wallet now like a reminder. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, trying to remember when it might have been taken. The clothes I'm wearing in the photo, the angle, the lighting, none of it triggers any memory. But every time I look at it, I notice something new. The way my eyes look in the photo, there's something unsettling about my own expression. I look calm, focused, like I know exactly what I'm doing, like I'm the one watching instead of being watched. Crime 9, we never used it, just a tight gap under the house. But I kept hearing soft sounds, scraping, tapping like something crawling. I assumed rodents, called pest control. They found nothing. One night I pressed my ear to the floorboards. I heard breathing, shallow, rhythmic, then a whisper, my name, not once, not as a question, over and over like a chant. I recorded it, played it back. Silence. I drilled through and looked in. The space was empty, no wires, no speakers, no pipes. But as I looked closer, I saw marks etched into the wood. Not letters, tally marks, dozens of them. And beneath them a crude drawing of my house with a figure standing under it. The drawing unsettled me more than the whispers. The lines were carved deep, deliberate. Someone had spent considerable time under my house, marking wood with methodical precision. I counted the tally marks, 47. Each one carved with what looked like a nail or small blade, the wood splintered around the edges where pressure had been applied. I started researching the house's history through public records. The previous owner had died suddenly. Natural causes, the report stated, but neighbors whispered about odd behavior in his final months. He had become obsessed with home security, installing locks on interior doors, boarding up windows. His sister mentioned he complained about sounds beneath the floorboards. The real estate agent never disclosed these details during my purchase. When I called her, she seemed nervous, claiming she knew nothing about the previous owner's death beyond what was legally required. Her voice carried a tremor I hadn't noticed during our initial meetings. She ended the conversation abruptly when I mentioned the crawl space. I decided to examine the space more thoroughly. Armed with a flashlight and measuring tape, I crawled through the narrow opening. The musty air carried an unusual metallic scent, like old pennies left too long in a drawer. My hands brushed against the wooden support beams, feeling the rough texture of the carved marks. Near the far corner, I discovered something the initial inspection had missed. A small cloth bundle, wrapped tight and secured with what appeared to be fishing line. Inside, I found personal items that didn't belong to me or the previous owner. A woman's ring, tarnished but distinctive. A library card with a name I didn't recognize. A photograph of a child, the edges yellowed with age. The library card led me to ask questions around the neighborhood. An elderly woman 3 houses down remembered the name. A young mother who had lived in the area years ago. She had disappeared suddenly, leaving behind a confused husband and a toddler. Police had investigated but found no evidence of foul play. She had simply vanished, along with her car and some personal belongings. But the ring and photograph suggested otherwise. I brought these items to the local police station, explaining how I'd found them. The detective who reviewed my statement appeared uncomfortable with the details. He took notes mechanically, but his expression suggested he already knew more than he was willing to share. I learned through careful questioning that this wasn't the first time items had been discovered in crawl spaces throughout the neighborhood. Similar findings had been reported over the years, always dismissed as coincidental or explained away through bureaucratic language that obscured rather than clarified. The detective mentioned that the previous owner of my house had contacted them multiple times before his death, claiming someone was living beneath his home. They had performed welfare checks but never found evidence to support his claims. After his death, the complaints stopped, and the matter was quietly closed. I began monitoring the crawl space more carefully, setting up a simple recording device to capture any sounds during the night. For several days, the recordings revealed nothing unusual. Then I noticed something disturbing. The tally marks had increased. 3 new marks had appeared, carved with the same methodical precision as the others. Someone was still accessing the space beneath my house, but how? I had examined every possible entry point and found them all sealed. The only opening was the one I had been using, and it required considerable effort to navigate. I decided to remain awake and listen more carefully. Around what felt like the deepest part of the night, I heard movement below, not the scurrying of rodents or settling of old wood, deliberate human movement. Someone crawling slowly through the narrow space, pausing occasionally as if listening for sounds above. My phone was in the next room. I moved carefully across the floor, avoiding boards I knew would creak. As I reached for the device, the sound stopped abruptly. Complete silence followed, lasting until dawn. When I checked the crawl space the next day, I found 4 additional tally marks. The pattern became clear. Someone was keeping count of something related to my presence in the house, but the mathematics didn't make sense. The marks appeared more frequently than my days of residence. Either the counting system represented something other than daily occurrences, or multiple people were adding to the total. I installed motion-activated cameras around the exterior of the house, hoping to capture evidence of unauthorized entry. The recordings showed nothing unusual during daylight hours, but several nighttime recordings contained anomalies. Brief moments where the camera would stop recording, then resume several minutes later with slight changes in positioning. The cloth bundle in the crawl space had contained other items I hadn't initially examined closely. Small personal effects that suggested multiple people, a man's wedding ring, children's toys, items that belonged to different time periods based on their wear and style. Someone had been collecting these things for years, possibly decades. I began to suspect that the previous owner's death might not have been as natural as the official report suggested. His obsession with home security, his complaints about sounds beneath the house, his sudden death after months of escalating paranoia. The timeline suggested he had discovered something that others preferred to keep hidden. The neighborhood had experienced several unexplained disappearances over the years. I researched local newspaper archives and found scattered reports of missing persons, usually dismissed as voluntary departures or explained through family disputes. But the pattern was consistent. People who lived within a few blocks of my house had vanished without adequate explanation. I decided to confront this situation more directly. I prepared to spend an entire night in the crawl space, waiting to see who or what was creating the tally marks. Armed with a flashlight, recording device, and pepper spray, I positioned myself in the corner where the marks were most concentrated. The wait was longer than I had anticipated. Hours passed in complete silence. My body ached from the cramped position, and I began to question the wisdom of this approach. Then I heard breathing that wasn't my own, slow, controlled, coming from somewhere deeper in the space. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound, but saw nothing. The breathing continued, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, as if someone was moving through areas of the crawl space I couldn't access. I realized there might be connections to other houses, passages that linked multiple properties through their underground spaces. As dawn approached, I heard voices above me, multiple people walking through my house, speaking in hushed tones. I recognized one voice as belonging to the real estate agent who had sold me the property. Another sounded like the detective who had taken my statement. They were discussing how to handle what they called the situation. I remained hidden, recording their conversation. They spoke about maintaining property values, protecting community reputation, and preventing unnecessary investigations. One person mentioned that the previous owner had become too much of a problem and that my inquiries were following a similar pattern. They left before full daylight, but their conversation had revealed the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't a case of random criminal activity. It was an organized effort involving multiple people in positions of authority, designed to conceal something that had been happening in this neighborhood for years. I realized that bringing this matter to local authorities would be futile. The very people I would report to were part of whatever was being concealed. I was trapped in a situation where the normal channels of justice and protection had been compromised. The tally marks in the crawl space weren't counting days or visits. They were counting victims, and my name being whispered in the darkness wasn't a supernatural phenomenon. It was reconnaissance. Someone had been studying me, preparing for whatever fate had befallen the others whose personal effects were hidden beneath my house. I made plans to leave immediately, but I knew that running wouldn't solve the underlying problem. Other people would move into this house, and the cycle would continue. The neighborhood would maintain its quiet facade while concealing something far more sinister. The recording device I had left in the crawl space captured one final sound before I retrieved it. My own voice, speaking words I had never said, discussing plans I had never made. Someone had been practicing, learning to imitate my speech patterns with disturbing accuracy. I still live in this house. I still hear the sounds beneath the floorboards. The tally marks continue to increase. But now I understand that I'm not investigating a crime that has already occurred. I'm living inside one that's still happening, and I'm no longer sure whether I'm the investigator or simply the next name to be whispered in the darkness. Story 10. The old Polaroid held secrets buried beneath its faded surface, a relic of forgotten birthdays and lost memories. Among the smiling faces and flickering candles, a hidden figure lurked in the shadows, unnoticed by all but one. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the box of old photos in her mother's attic, a simple label reading memories belying the chilling discovery within. As she sifted through the snapshots of bygone celebrations, a sense of unease crept over her like a shroud. The mysterious man in the background of each photo seemed to defy explanation, his presence growing more pronounced with each passing moment captured in time. What began as a mere silhouette at the edge of a frame evolved into a haunting figure standing just behind her younger self, a phantom intruder in the midst of family gatherings. No one recalled seeing him, yet there he was, a spectral presence haunting the periphery of joyous occasions. Desperate for answers, Sarah turned to her father, only to be met with disbelief and a tinge of fear in his voice. The man in the photos remained a mystery, his identity a puzzle with no solution. Seeking help, she brought the eerie collection to Detective Marcus Reed, a weathered investigator with a keen eye for detail and a mind open to the inexplicable. As the rain tapped against the windows of the precinct, Sarah laid out the photos before the detective, each image a piece of a disturbing puzzle. The progression of the figure through the gatherings was undeniable, his intent unknown but unmistakably sinister. Reed delved into the case, contacting all who had been present at the events captured in the photos, but no one could shed light on the enigmatic stranger. Further analysis of the images revealed hidden details, clues that led to a breakthrough in the investigation. Dental records linked the shadowy figure to Robert Keller, a maintenance worker with a dark past tied to unsolved child abductions. Keller's connection to the rental property where Sarah's birthday had taken place unraveled a web of horror that spanned decades, connecting him to disappearances long thought forgotten. The revelation of Keller's dark legacy sent shockwaves through the community, bringing closure to families who had long grieved their lost loved ones. Sarah, haunted by the knowledge of the unseen danger that had lurked in her past, found solace in the truth, no matter how chilling it may be. The shadow in the family photos had been unmasked, his legacy of terror exposed to the light of justice. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the damning evidence of a hidden evil, Sarah reflected on the power of a single image to reveal the darkest truths. The box of photos lay before her, a testament to the unseen dangers that can linger in the background of our lives, waiting to be brought into the harsh light of reality. In the stillness of the room, she knew that some mysteries were better left uncovered, some shadows better left undisturbed in the quiet of the past. Story 11. In the quiet embrace of the night, a tale whispered through the peeling wallpaper of a Victorian-era home. Michael and Sarah Klein, unwitting tenants of a house that held secrets deeper than its ornate woodwork and high ceilings, embarked on a journey fueled by curiosity and shadowed by mystery. The layers of time unfurled before them, revealing a name written in desperation: Alina Winters, etched into the wall like a haunting echo from the past. As they delved into the enigma of the name that seemed to resonate throughout the house, a chilling realization crept into their hearts. The woman who had sold them the house, Margaret Cavendish, bore a striking resemblance to the missing Alina Winters from decades ago. A photograph frozen in time, a face mirrored in the present, a connection woven by threads of fate, or perhaps something more sinister. With each layer peeled back, the past unfurled its tendrils, drawing them into a web of intrigue they could not escape. The search for Alina Winters led them down a winding path of unanswered questions and unsettling discoveries. As they delved deeper, the boundaries between past and present blurred, merging into a tapestry of deception and fractured identities. Alina Winters, a ghostly presence lingering in the walls, beckoning them to unravel the truth hidden within the confines of the old house. The investigation took on a life of its own, weaving a tale of lost souls and shattered realities. The name on the wall, a plea for remembrance, a cry for justice in a world where the lines between sanity and madness blurred like ink on aged paper. In the stillness of the night, as shadows danced across the walls, the house whispered its secrets to those willing to listen. Michael and Sarah stood on the threshold of a revelation that would forever alter their perception of the world they thought they knew. And as the truth emerged from the depths of the past, casting a long shadow over the present, they realized that some mysteries were never meant to be solved, some stories never meant to be told. And so they drifted into the realm of dreams, where reality and imagination intertwined in a dance as old as time itself. Story 12. The motel stood as a relic of forgotten times, its faded facade a testament to neglect. People passed through its doors fleetingly, seeking respite for a night, then moving on with the morning light. The receptionist, with a gaze tinged with mystery, handed her the key, his words barely a whisper, just, "Avoid the last door on the left." Intrigue sparked within her, a curious flame that beckoned her towards the forbidden. That night, surrounded by shadows, she found herself standing before the ominous door. The handle chilled her hand like ice, and as she leaned in closer, she heard a faint breath, a whisper of existence from the other side. Detective Morgan Reed, weariness etched on her face, ventured into the room marked by yellow tape, a barrier between the living and the dead. The scent of iron lingered in the air, a grim reminder of the violence that had stained the room. In the midst of contrasting scenes, pristine bathroom, untouched bed, and the tragedy on the floor, a young woman lay lifeless, her gaze fixed on eternity. Reed knelt beside the fallen figure, a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded. The forensic expert, devoid of emotion, captured the scene in photographs, a routine dance in the macabre waltz of death. Third one this season, he stated matter-of-factly, the weight of repetition heavy in his voice. The victim, adorned in elegance, seemed out of place in the decrepit motel. A purse lay open, its contents untouched, dispelling the notion of robbery. This was a crime of a different nature, driven by motives unknown. Back at the precinct, Reed pieced together the puzzle of three women, each a mirror of the other, each meeting a tragic end in obscure lodgings. Speculations swirled, whispers of a predator lurking in the shadows of anonymity. Autopsy reports revealed the methodical hands of a killer, leaving no trace of their identity under the victim's nails. This was not a crime of impulse, but a deliberate act, a personal vendetta veiled in darkness. Days merged into nights as the investigation deepened, shedding light on the victim's hidden life. Elaine Werner, a woman of caution and precision, had secrets that led to her demise in that desolate room. A breakthrough came in the form of a cryptic mention, a man known only as C, in Werner's clandestine world. Reed delved into the shadows of Werner's workplace, where facades crumbled and truths emerged. Charles Emerson, a figure of authority, exuded charm and deceit in equal measure. His alibi held firm until suspicion cast a shadow over his polished exterior. The web of lies began to unravel, revealing a sinister truth. Forensic evidence linked Emerson to the crimes, his denials crumbling under the weight of incriminating proof. His meticulous facade shattered, exposing the darkness that lurked beneath the veneer of respectability. In the courtroom, the truth unfurled like a tapestry of tragedy, weaving the fates of the victims and the perpetrator. Emerson's stoic demeanor wavered only briefly, a glimpse of the void within him, a void devoid of remorse, devoid of humanity. The trial, dubbed the Door on the Left case, captured the public's imagination, dissected by psychologists and armchair detectives alike. But for Reed, the echoes of that night lingered, a haunting reminder that some doors once opened led to unfathomable depths. Amidst the evidence, locked away from prying eyes, three keys stood as silent witnesses to the darkness that resided behind the last door on the left, a reminder that some secrets, once exposed, can never be concealed again. Story 13: The Mystery of the Hidden Room. The ancient library, once slated for destruction, hid a secret that lay dormant for years. As the workers labored to dismantle the building, a serendipitous stumble revealed a concealed latch nestled within a dusty bookshelf. With a gentle click, the shelf swung open, unveiling a passage shrouded in darkness that led to a forgotten chamber. Inside this clandestine space, the air hung heavy with the weight of time, untouched and undisturbed. No furnishings adorned the room, save for a solitary chair anchored to the floor at its center. Etched repeatedly on the walls in frantic scrawls, a haunting message echoed, "I am still here." The call went out to the construction foreman, who in turn summoned the authorities. What had begun as a routine demolition swiftly spiraled into a chilling enigma. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, surveyed the grim scene with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. His flashlight pierced the shadows, casting an eerie glow on the cryptic words that adorned the walls. "Secure the area," Walsh commanded, his voice resounding in the confined space. "No one must disturb a single thing until the forensics team arrives." The history of the building added a layer of intrigue to the unfolding mystery. The library had once belonged to the prominent Harrington family, who had bequeathed it to the public following the enigmatic disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. She had vanished without a trace during her final year of college, leaving behind a void that no amount of searching could fill. The prevailing belief was that she had fled to forge a new path, but her family clung to a darker truth. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden room, they unearthed tantalizing clues. Strands of hair and fibers were embedded in the weathered chair, while the scratched walls harbored minute traces of blood and skin cells. Initial analysis hinted at a young female presence, hinting at a harrowing tale of captivity and struggle. Walsh delved into the Harrington family's past, his instincts honing in on the peculiar timing of the library's donation. It had coincided eerily with Rebecca's disappearance, raising unsettling questions. Further scrutiny uncovered a disturbing link. The very bookshelf concealing the hidden room had been installed by a contractor exclusively hired by Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the family's patriarch. Financial records hinted at clandestine dealings, with exorbitant payments made to the contractor far exceeding standard renovation costs. Former library staff expressed shock at the revelation, unaware of the concealed chamber's existence. One elderly librarian recollected Maxwell's penchant for solitude in that particular section, attributing it to his purported reverence for the historical woodwork. The investigation reached a chilling crescendo as DNA evidence conclusively tied Rebecca to the hidden room. She had not fled but had been held captive, potentially by her own kin. Armed with a warrant, detectives raided the Harrington estate, unearthing a sinister journal hidden in Maxwell's study. Its entries painted a disturbing portrait of obsession and control, culminating in a chilling ultimatum. Confronted with irrefutable proof, Maxwell's facade shattered, revealing a man consumed by fear and desperation. The truth spilled forth in a chilling confession, detailing a tragic sequence of events that culminated in Rebecca's untimely demise. The room bore witness to a heinous crime, its walls echoing the final struggles of a young woman silenced in her prime. Excavation beneath the hidden chamber confirmed the grim reality as Rebecca's remains were uncovered, adorned with the silver bracelet that had once adorned her wrist. In a courtroom heavy with grief and loss, justice prevailed, bringing a measure of closure to a family torn asunder by dark secrets. The library's demolition ground to a halt, transformed into a somber memorial for a life extinguished too soon. Floral tributes adorned the entrance, a poignant reminder of the tragedy that had lurked behind a facade of normalcy. In a cruel twist of fate, Rebecca's haunting message, etched in desperation, ensured her legacy endured a testament to the enduring power of truth and the relentless pursuit of justice. Story 14. A mysterious package arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single brass key weathered with time. The homeowner, Sarah Miller, didn't recognize it, yet it stirred a sense of familiarity within her. She tried the key in every lock she owned, but none would turn, for it did not belong to her. As she placed the key on her coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime despite being silent for years. Sarah reported the peculiar incident to the authorities, setting off a chain of events that would unravel into a chilling criminal investigation, shaking the once quiet suburban neighborhood to its core. The responding officer at first dismissed her concerns as a mere mistake, A key in the mail, what harm could it bring, he pondered. However, Sarah's unease persisted, leading the officer to take the key as evidence, though more to calm her fears than out of genuine suspicion. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator from the Special Victims Unit, received the case file during the morning briefing. The brass key sat on his desk, unassuming yet strangely disquieting. Background checks on Sarah revealed no hint of criminal activity. A retired teacher, a widow, a mother, her life appeared ordinary and devoid of any sinister secrets. Forensic analysis uncovered no fingerprints on the key except Sarah's own. The envelope yielded no useful clues, bearing only a generic postmark. The key itself, a standard Schlage, showed signs of age and wear, hinting at a long history. A breakthrough came when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique pattern through the department database. A match was found in a cold case from 7 years prior, a storage unit linked to gruesome evidence of violence against women. The original investigation had hit a dead end due to lack of conclusive evidence. As Harmon delved deeper into the case, he discovered a connection between Sarah and a former neighbor named Harold Jenkins, a man with a shadowy past and an eerie penchant for anonymity. Jenkins had left behind a trail of unexplained gaps in his history, raising suspicions. The investigation took a sinister turn when a hidden room filled with identical brass keys was unearthed beneath a cabin linked to Jenkins. The keys bore names and dates, hinting at a trail of victims previously unknown to law enforcement. The discovery of human remains behind the cabin confirmed the depth of Jenkins' depravity. A nationwide manhunt was launched for Jenkins, now dubbed the Keymaster by the press. Amidst fear and uncertainty, Sarah found herself at the center of a dark game she never wished to play. The community was left reeling at the revelation of such evil lurking in their midst. The hunt for Jenkins culminated in a dramatic confrontation that ended with his lifeless body found in a remote location. His journal, filled with chilling accounts of his crimes, addressed Sarah directly, revealing his twisted obsession with her. The investigation uncovered a total of 32 victims, bringing closure to families who had long awaited answers. Sarah, traumatized by the proximity of evil to her once peaceful life, could never return home, forever haunted by the horrors she had unknowingly brushed against. The case of the Keymaster stands as a stark reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a facade of normalcy. Researchers continue to study Jenkins' writings in hopes of preventing similar tragedies in the future, while a collection of brass keys in an evidence locker silently bears witness to lives cut short by unspeakable evil. Story 15. In the beginning, there was just a faint flicker, a subtle disturbance in the baby monitor's transmission. The mother brushed it off as mere interference, attributing it to technical glitches. But then the audio crackled and a soft voice whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chilling sensation crept down her spine, freezing her in place. With a racing heart, she hurried to her son's room, only to find the crib empty. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only anomaly was the stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its dark, glassy eyes fixed on her. Rebecca's screams echoed through the house, tearing through the night until her voice grew hoarse. The neighbors, startled by her cries, dialed emergency services. When the authorities arrived, they discovered Rebecca cradling the stuffed rabbit, swaying back and forth on the nursery floor. Her 4-month-old baby, Samuel, had vanished without a trace. The initial investigation yielded little information. No signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered on the security system. The footage from the baby monitor showed nothing out of the ordinary until that haunting voice and static disrupted the silence. The baffled investigators grappled with the perplexing question: how could someone enter a locked home, snatch a child, and depart without a trace, leaving behind only a disturbed stuffed animal? Suspicion soon fell upon Rebecca. Her strained relationship with her husband, Daniel, combined with her history of seeking help for postpartum depression, cast a shadow of doubt over her. During questioning, her composure struck the detective as eerily composed for a mother facing such a harrowing ordeal. Whispers circulated in the community, casting a veil of suspicion over Rebecca. Then a breakthrough emerged. Microscopic fibers foreign to the household were discovered on the nursery windowsill. These fibers belonged to a rare type of climbing rope, hinting at a skilled intruder gaining access to the second-floor nursery from outside. The focus of the investigation shifted. Surveillance footage from the neighbors unveiled a shadowy figure moving stealthily through the night. A distinctive boot print in the garden soil matched those used by military personnel and seasoned climbers. Rebecca faded into the background as attention turned to Daniel, who had returned from his business trip in a state of confusion and distress. Unusual calluses on his hands raised suspicion, and his recent interest in rock climbing as a stress reliever raised eyebrows. Financial records painted a troubling picture. Daniel had recently taken out a hefty life insurance policy on Samuel. Phone records unveiled a series of calls to an unknown number that ceased abruptly before the abduction. The case took a dark twist when it was revealed that Daniel had a hidden second family, unbeknownst to Rebecca. As the investigation delved deeper, the hacked baby monitor emerged as a crucial clue. Digital forensics unveiled a remote manipulation of the device's signal. The whispered voice urging sleep did not originate from the nursery, but was projected to Rebecca's receiver through a digital breach. Following the trail of intrusion, investigators stumbled upon a shocking revelation in a residential basement. Samuel was found alive under the care of a woman named Elaine. Surrendering without resistance, her vacant eyes betrayed a haunting emptiness as she was apprehended. The pieces fell into place through old photographs and DNA tests. Elaine was Daniel's first wife, who had suffered a miscarriage years ago. Consumed by grief, she had monitored Daniel's life from afar, witnessing the formation of his new family with Rebecca. Despite Daniel's denial of involvement, digital evidence painted a different narrative. The fibers on his climbing equipment matched those from the crime scene, his boots leaving a telltale print in the garden. Encrypted messages between Daniel and Elaine detailed their sinister scheme, Daniel facilitating access to the home security system while Elaine executed the abduction, fueled by the belief that Samuel was rightfully hers. In the courtroom, a hushed silence enveloped the spectators as the haunting audio from the baby monitor played, revealing not only the whispered command, but also Daniel's distinctive cough in the background, placing him at the scene he professed ignorance of. The jury's swift deliberation culminated in maximum sentences for Daniel and Elaine, condemned for kidnapping, conspiracy, and endangering a child. Rebecca and Samuel sought solace in a new beginning, far removed from the shadows of the past. The case catalyzed a shift in investigative tactics, prompting a nationwide review of baby monitor security vulnerabilities and heightened nursery safety measures. Experts cautioned against the evolving sophistication of tech-enabled crimes targeting the most vulnerable. Samuel grew up shielded from the memory of his disappearance, while Rebecca safeguarded the stuffed rabbit, a silent witness locked away in a box. She couldn't part with it, nor could she face those unyielding black eyes that had borne witness to the truth concealed in the baby monitor's whispered secrets. The monitor, though deceptive, had captured a truth veiled in darkness, unraveling a tale of betrayal and deceit that shattered lives and redefined justice. Story 16. The old house had stood silent and empty, its history shrouded in whispers of a young woman who had vanished without a trace. Neighbors spoke of her disappearance, the mystery lingering like a ghost in the walls. When the new tenants crossed the threshold, they felt a chill in the air, a sense of unease that clung to the shadows. In the bedroom, a heavy stillness hung, the door stubbornly locked from within. With a creak and a groan, they forced it open, revealing a room frozen in time. The room exhaled a sigh of neglect, the musty scent of abandonment mingling with something more elusive. The bed lay pristine, untouched by time, while the mirror gleamed with an eerie clarity. A lone candle stood vigil on the desk, its wax a testimony to forgotten flames, a silent witness to the passage of years. And there on the desk lay a notebook, its pages whispering secrets in fresh ink. Detective Morgan delved into the notebook, tracing the words of Elise Winters, a name long lost to the winds of time. Her script danced across the pages, a tale of meticulous precision unraveling with each turn of a leaf. The final entry, etched with urgency, spoke of shadows in the night, of a looming presence that stalked her every move. As the forensic team combed the room for clues, a sense of foreboding settled over the scene. Elise's life story unfolded in the ink-stained pages, revealing a young woman on the brink of a revelation that would alter the course of her fate. The detective pondered her words, the weight of truth heavy in the air. The landlord lingered in the doorway, a ghostly figure in the half-light, his features etched with worry. He muttered of checks done, of doors left open, of a past that refused to stay buried. Elise's life had been a tapestry of secrets, woven into the very fabric of the room she had once called home. Through interviews and evidence, a portrait emerged of a woman caught in a web of deceit, her pursuit of justice leading her down a treacherous path. Her disappearance had left a void in the world, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. The room held its secrets close, revealing little of the truth that lay buried beneath its floorboards. But as the investigators probed deeper, a glimmer of hope emerged, a hidden compartment, a key to a locked box that held the key to Elise's final testament. Inside the box, a trove of incriminating evidence lay in wait, a damning indictment of corruption and greed. Elise's voice echoed through the recordings, a beacon of truth in a sea of lies. The revelations sparked a chain reaction that would shake the foundations of power and privilege. As the investigation unfolded, a sinister figure emerged from the shadows, a man of wealth and influence, his hands stained with the blood of the innocent. Vincent Harriman, a name whispered in fear, stood at the center of a storm that threatened to consume him. The truth, like a flickering flame, danced on the edge of perception, illuminating the darkness that had shrouded Elise's fate. The hidden passage, a gateway to the heart of the mystery, beckoned the detective onward, towards a reckoning long overdue. In a courtroom heavy with the weight of justice, Harriman's lies crumbled like dust, his facade of innocence shattered by the truth he could no longer deny. Elise's voice, silenced in death, resonated through the halls of power, a testament to the courage of one woman against a world bent on deceit. The house, a silent witness to the drama that had unfolded within its walls, stood empty once more, its secrets laid bare for all to see. The light in the upstairs window flickered, a beacon of remembrance for a soul lost but not forgotten. As night fell over the quiet street, whispers of Elise Winters' legacy echoed in the wind, a reminder that justice, though delayed, would always find its way home. The room she had left behind, a shrine to her memory, stood as a testament to the power of truth in a world veiled in shadows. Story 17, as she crossed the threshold, dust danced in the stagnant air of the abandoned Victorian. Time had frozen within its decaying walls, each room draped in shadows and memories. Yet amidst the stillness, a peculiar mystery lingered. Every door she opened, every path she took, inevitably led her back to the parlor, trapped in a haunting loop of familiarity. The front door she had entered through had vanished, leaving her stranded in a maze of rooms that refused to let her escape. Detective Sarah Lind found herself immersed in the eerie ambience of the crime scene, where Morgan Pierce's lifeless form sat serenely in the parlor, as if waiting for an unseen guest. The house, once a mere curiosity to locals, now harbored a darkness that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. The medical examiner's hushed tones revealed the grim truth of Morgan's demised death by asphyxiation, her peaceful countenance belying the tragedy that had befallen her. The whispers of the house's enigmatic reputation reached Lynn's ears as she delved into the details of Morgan's life. A young researcher captivated by architectural oddities, Morgan had ventured into the Victorian's depths in pursuit of its hidden truths. Her journal entries chronicled the anomalies she encountered: doors leading to ever-shifting rooms, strange acoustics, and chilling drafts that defied explanation. It seemed the house itself held secrets that beckoned to be unearthed. Intriguing clues surfaced during the investigation, pointing to a connection between Morgan and Adam Reeves, an expert in rare spatial phenomena. Their shared fascination with the Victorian hinted at a bond that transcended mere academic curiosity. Yet, as Lynn delved deeper, she uncovered a dark family legacy woven into the very fabric of the house, a legacy of mysterious deaths that bore the ominous moniker of the Claiming. The revelation of hidden chambers and ancient artifacts hinted at a power far beyond the realm of mortal understanding, a force that ensnared those who dared to unravel its mysteries. The tragic fate of Adam Reeves mirrored Morgan's own demise, both souls ensnared by forces they could not comprehend. Lynn's investigation yielded more questions than answers, each revelation leading her deeper into the labyrinthine secrets of the Victorian. As the case remained unsolved, the condemned Victorian stood as a silent sentinel, its secrets locked within its decaying walls. Whispers of spectral lights and vanishing visitors only added to its mystique, fueling rumors of a malevolent presence that guarded its enigmatic truths. Some believed the house claimed those who delved too greedily into its mysteries, while others whispered of ancient powers that lurked in the shadows of its forgotten halls. The truth remained elusive, a mirage just out of reach, much like the ever-shifting doors of the Victorian that led nowhere but back to the beginning. Lind could only wonder at the depths of the darkness that dwelled within, knowing that some secrets were better left undisturbed in the silent embrace of the abandoned Victorian. Story 18. As she cleared the mist from the mirror, her gaze fixed on her reflection. Yet a subtle unease crept in. Her features appeared usual, her attire unchanged. But the longer she peered, the more a sense of disquiet settled within her. A flicker caught in her peripheral vision, a motion not of her own making. When she turned away, her reflection lingered, motionless, observing. The enigma of Rebecca Thorne commenced with that eerie incident in her bathroom. What unraveled next would baffle investigators and cast a shadow over the community for years to come. Rebecca resided solo in a modest flat in a serene suburban enclave. Her acquaintances portrayed her as meticulous, introverted, a woman who maintained a solitary existence but exchanged pleasantries with neighbors. Her occupation as a data analyst for a medium-sized firm shaped her life with structure and exactitude. Nothing about her hinted at her future role as the focal point of one of the most mystifying criminal inquiries of the era. The initial anomaly seemed innocuous. Rebecca noticed slight displacements of items in her home, nothing missing, just rearranged. A mug shifted to another shelf, books rearranged on the shelves, her toothbrush misplaced on the opposite side of the sink. She brushed off these peculiarities as lapses in memory, a natural consequence of long hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights until her sight blurred. Detective Marion Shaw received the initial report when Rebecca, after enduring weeks of these disruptions, finally reached out to the authorities. The initial evaluation, nothing criminal, possibly a matter for mental health services rather than law enforcement. Shaw documented the grievance but consigned it to the pile of non-urgent cases. There was no concrete evidence, Shaw later testified. No signs of forced entry, no missing belongings, just a woman sensing something amiss in her own abode. The incident with the bathroom mirror altered everything. During her second interaction with the police, Rebecca vividly recounted the event, how her reflection appeared to move independently, how she felt surveilled even in solitude. This time she possessed proof, a security camera she had installed herself, directed at her front door. The footage unveiled a revelation that sent a shiver through even the most seasoned officers. The grainy video captured Rebecca departing for work in the morning, yet 20 minutes later an identical figure to Rebecca used a key to enter her residence. Forensic analysts scrutinized the footage for signs of tampering or digital manipulation. None were found. The individual entering the abode moved like Rebecca, dressed like Rebecca, even carried the same distinctive leather bag that Rebecca owned. However, according to the time-stamped footage from her workplace security system, Rebecca had already scanned into her office building across town. "We are facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superior. "Someone who has meticulously studied Miss Thorne and can imitate her with eerie precision." The investigation heightened. Fingerprints found throughout the apartment matched solely Rebecca's. No foreign DNA was unearthed. Neighbors reported observing nothing out of the ordinary, merely Rebecca coming and going as she always did. One neighbor, Mrs. Keller, mentioned she had greeted Rebecca upon her return home one evening and received no response, which she found unusual but not alarming. Rebecca commenced documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor alterations in her home escalated. Food she didn't recall eating vanished from her refrigerator. Her computer displayed searches she had not initiated. Most disconcerting were the photographs on her phone, selfies resembling her, yet she had no recollection of capturing them. In some, her countenance appeared subtly awry, the smile too wide or the gaze too intense. "I feel as though I am descending into madness," she revealed to Detective Shaw during their third meeting. "Or someone is attempting to convince me of my own madness." The breakthrough occurred when investigators discerned a pattern in the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated the residence when Rebecca departed for specific commitments: therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery shopping, predetermined activities with predictable durations. "Someone possesses an intimate knowledge of your routine," Shaw elucidated. "This isn't happenstance. This is calculated surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist postulated that they faced a fixation case, someone fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, inhabiting her life, perhaps eventually supplanting her entirely. Such instances were rare but catalogued in psychological literature. The inquiry narrowed when Rebecca mentioned a former co-worker, Lily Winters, who had been terminated after displaying escalating erratic behavior. Lily had collaborated closely with Rebecca, often commenting on their similarities. Following her dismissal, she had dispatched a series of disconcerting emails to Rebecca. "We could be one and the same," one correspondent stated. "At times, I feel more like you than you do." Detective Shaw secured a warrant to search Lily's residence. What they unearthed metamorphosed the case from eerie to chilling. One room in Lily's abode had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls were adorned with photographs, countless images of Rebecca entering her residence, shopping, socializing with friends, all captured without her knowledge. A closet contained exact replicas of Rebecca's attire. Cosmetics mirroring Rebecca's preferred brands resided on a vanity alongside meticulous notes about her mannerisms, speech patterns, and daily routines. Most incriminating were the practice videos. Lily had recorded herself mimicking Rebecca's gait, gestures, expressions. The evolution was discernible, initial attempts clumsy and conspicuous, later ones nearly indistinguishable from the authentic Rebecca. She aspired to become me, Rebecca murmured upon viewing the evidence. She wasn't merely imitating me, she was obliterating me. Forensic experts discovered sophisticated equipment for fabricating duplicates of keys and cloning electronic access cards. Lily had maintained an intricate system for monitoring Rebecca's movements, including a calendar with detailed projections of her agenda. What eluded investigators was Lily's ultimate objective. Journals discovered in her abode contained rambling entries that vacillated between the first and third person, occasionally referring to Rebecca as me and her within the same paragraph. The concluding entry unsettled investigators. Soon, only one of us will prevail. The stronger version will persist. When authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Her residence exhibited signs of abrupt departure, drawers left ajar, certain technology missing. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was relocated to a secure location with continuous surveillance, entering protective custody. For 3 weeks, authorities monitored every locale associated with her past life. Lily never materialized. The case veered into its final disquieting chapter when a security guard at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Despite being on leave, Rebecca had been sighted entering the building. Security footage affirmed that a figure identical to Rebecca had accessed the premises using a valid ID card, proceeded to her former workstation, and spent 40 minutes perusing her files before departing. Rebecca, safeguarded in a fortified safe house, could not have been present at the office. The implications became evident. Lily had not fled, she had made her move. She was now assuming Rebecca's identity, stepping into her existence while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains officially unresolved. Lily Winters remains at large. Rebecca Thorne refrained from returning to her former life, opting to forge a new identity in an undisclosed location. Detective Shaw maintains a photograph on her desk, 2 women strikingly similar in appearance. One is Rebecca Thorne. The other is Lily Winters. At times, she scrutinizes their countenances, seeking the disparities, the subtle markers that would differentiate one from the other. The genuinely alarming aspect Shaw often imparts to new recruits in the force is not that someone could resemble you or sound like you. It's that they could aspire to assume your identity so fervently that they erase themselves in the process. Identity is not solely what we present to the world, it's what we safeguard most vigilantly. And occasionally we fail to recognize its worth until someone endeavors to purloin it. Story 19, The Secret Watcher. She never fancied venturing up there, but the storm-s fury had forced her hand. The attic loomed overhead, a realm of forgotten treasures cloaked in dust and cobwebs. Amid the shadows, nestled in the farthest nook, stood an ancient dollhouse. Its miniature furniture was intricately arranged, a haunting attention to detail. Yet as she peered closer, a knot of unease coiled in her stomach. The figures within were not lifeless dolls, but tiny, meticulously carved replicas of her own family. Each miniature mirrored a member of her household, set in precise poses mimicking reality downstairs. Except for one, the figure meant to be her stood near the attic entrance, a silent sentinel in the miniature world. Rebecca Morgan traced a finger along the dollhouse's roof, feeling the indent where the tiny wooden replica of herself stood. A chill raced through her veins, unrelated to the icy draft whispering through the attic rafters. This dollhouse had no place here. It wasn't from her childhood home, but from a rental property her family had recently occupied. The unsettling revelation prompted Rebecca to alert the authorities, setting in motion a series of events that would unravel a sinister mystery. Law enforcement officers arrived at the suburban residence to find a family in distress, gathered in the living room, fearful of returning to the upper floors. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially brushed off their concerns as a prank or a product of overactive imaginations in a new environment. What struck Detective Harmon was the uncanny precision of the miniature figurines. Each tiny sculpture captured distinctive features of the family members: the father's receding hairline, the son's hoodie, the mother's small birthmark. The investigation took a dark turn when forensic teams uncovered fingerprints on the dollhouse belonging to none of the family members. Even more disturbing were the microscopic cameras hidden in the miniature figure's eyes, all linked to a sophisticated surveillance system concealed beneath the dollhouse. Analysis of the Morgan family's movements unveiled a disquieting pattern. The positions of the miniature figures didn't just mirror the family's evening routine, they replicated exact postures from various days, suggesting a meticulous observer had studied them closely. This was more than mere stalking, Detective Harmon mused. The level of obsession displayed here is beyond what we've seen before in criminal psychology. A concealed entrance in the pantry led investigators to a secret basement living space, hinting at an intruder who had dwelled beneath the family's feet for weeks. Food remnants, water bottles, and a sleeping bag indicated someone had been living there covertly. The absence of forced entry puzzled the investigators further. Property records unveiled that the house had remained vacant for almost a year before the Morgans' arrival, following the passing of its elderly owners. Neighbors had noticed little amiss, except for the occasional lights flickering in the vacant house. One elderly resident vaguely remembered glimpsing shadows through the windows, but assumed it was real estate agents showcasing the property. The breakthrough emerged from digital forensics, tracing the surveillance data to an apartment across town. Inside the apartment, a chilling array of photographs and journals documented the lives of the Morgan family and previous residents. Martin Wells, the son of the former homeowners, had spiraled into debt after his parents' demise. Instead of selling the property, he had fashioned a hidden abode to monitor tenants while collecting rent. The dollhouse served as his control hub, each miniature figure symbolizing a watched soul. Rebecca's placement by the attic door wasn't a threat, but a nod to her uncovering his voyeuristic scheme. During interrogation, Wells remained disturbingly composed, citing a need to safeguard his childhood home and its inhabitants. His fixation stemmed from a distorted sense of ownership and control. The psychological evaluation revealed a deep-seated delusion of possession, with the dollhouse embodying his dominance over both property and people. The Morgan family bid farewell to the tainted house, scarred by the revelation that they had been pawns in a twisted game of surveillance. Rebecca found solace not in removing the dollhouse, but in comprehending its chilling message. "We were mere playthings to him, manipulated and observed at his whim," she confided. Wells faced charges of stalking, privacy invasion, illegal surveillance, and trespassing, prompting a review of real estate regulations regarding property disclosures and tenant safety. The judge, during sentencing, acknowledged the profound violation inflicted upon the Morgan family. Wells hadn't merely breached their home, he had shattered their sanctuary and autonomy, reshaping their intimate moments for his perverse amusement. Criminologists shuddered at the realization of how long Wells might have lurked unnoticed if not for Rebecca's discovery. The Morgans sought refuge in a new abode, haunted by lingering shadows of paranoia. Rebecca's vigilance persisted, scouring closets and nooks for unseen threats. She banished all remnants of dollhouses, yet a whisper of unease lingered. "Some days I still feel eyes upon me," she confessed. Perhaps somewhere unseen hands still toy with miniature versions of us in a dollhouse waiting to be unveiled. Story 20. In the stillness of the morning, a peculiar package arrived at Sarah Miller's doorstep. A package with no return address, no tracking number to trace its journey. Just a humble cardboard box, its corners dampened by the gentle touch of morning dew. It was not intended for her. The name on it did not belong to anyone she knew. Common sense whispered for her to ignore it, to leave it where it lay. Yet the siren call of curiosity beckoned, and Sarah succumbed. With delicate fingers, she peeled back the tape, sealing the mystery within, anticipating the mundane contents of books or clothes. However, what she found nestled inside was far from ordinary. A VHS tape, its black plastic casing whispering secrets of the past, accompanied by a solitary sticky note with a cryptic message: "Watch alone." Sarah held the weight of the tape in her hands, a weight that seemed to defy logic, burdened with the gravity of the unknown. Her fingertips danced along the worn edges, tracing the history etched into the plastic. The handwritten note bore the imprint of urgency, each stroke a plea for attention. Outside, the world carried on its routine symphony the distant bark of a dog, the laughter of children playing, the rhythmic hum of a lawnmower slicing through the serene morning air. Unbeknownst to the world outside, a tale of mystery had arrived at Sarah's doorstep. Bringing the enigmatic package inside, Sarah placed it on her kitchen counter, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. The name on the box, Daniel Whitaker, was a stranger to her, a name that held no place in her memory. She had been a resident of the house for years, and never had she received mail for a Daniel Whitaker. Conflicted emotions tugged at her as she glanced at the relic of a VCR, a machine of nostalgia. There was something about the tape, a magnetic pull of the unknown, a riddle waiting to be unraveled. Against her better judgment, Sarah inserted the tape into the aging VCR. Static crackled on the screen, a dance of white noise before coalescing into a dimly lit room, bathed in the glow of a lone lamp. The camera angle skewed, as if hastily positioned, revealing a man seated in a wooden chair, his features shrouded in shadows. "My name is Daniel Whitaker." His voice, a calm yet somber melody, began to weave a tale of intrigue. "If you are watching this, they have found you, and soon they will find me too." With a lean forward, the man emerged from the shadows, his countenance etched with the weariness of sleepless nights and unyielding vigilance. "I am innocent," Daniel's voice carried a weight of conviction. "But they will say otherwise. They will say I knew her, that we quarreled, that witnesses heard our disputes. Lies, all of it. I never laid eyes on Catherine Walsh until her face graced the news." The camera trembled as Daniel adjusted it, revealing the stark emptiness of his surroundings, a room devoid of comfort, a transient abode of one ready to flee at a moment's notice. "They framed me," his voice trembled with suppressed emotion. "Planted evidence to paint me as a killer, but I swear I am innocent." Meanwhile, Detective Eliza Ramirez found herself entangled in a web of deceit as she unraveled the threads of the Walsh murder case. 5 identical VHS tapes, 5 individuals drawn into the enigma of Daniel Whitaker's plight. The man accused vanished without a trace, leaving behind a tapestry of doubt and suspicion. The pieces of evidence painted a damning picture, a perfect crime pinned on an unsuspecting man. As the investigation deepened, Ramirez uncovered a labyrinth of deception surrounding Catherine Walsh, a whistleblower silenced by powerful forces. Pharmacorp, a titan in the pharmaceutical world, harbored dark secrets that Walsh had dared to expose. Her murder, a warning to those who dared challenge the status quo. The detective's gaze shifted from the surface to the shadows, where truth lurked in the guise of falsehood. Sarah Miller's world was upturned once more when a second package arrived, bearing the weight of revelations. Documents spilled forth, a trove of evidence pointing to a conspiracy veiled in the guise of justice. Pharmacorp's sins laid bare, Walsh's crusade vindicated posthumously. The pieces of the puzzle began to align, whispering of a truth too dark to be ignored. A second tape surfaced, shedding light on the shadows that cloaked the truth. Whitaker's voice echoed through the static, recounting a tale of surveillance and betrayal. The unseen hands that orchestrated his downfall, the machinations of a system designed to crush dissent. The tape became a beacon of truth in a sea of lies, guiding the lost toward justice. The stalemate broke when Sarah Miller, with keen eyes, noticed a detail overlooked by others, a reflection in a window, a clue to unravel the mystery. Together with Detective Ramirez, they followed the trail to a storage unit where revelations awaited. Whitaker's journal, Walsh's evidence, and the damning proof of a frame-up orchestrated by those in power. Justice, a silent specter, descended upon the perpetrators not with thunderous retribution, but with the quiet resolve of undeniable proof. Executives fell, the head of security crumbled, and the truth emerged victorious. The curtain fell on a saga of deception, leaving behind a scarred man and a woman who inadvertently became a harbinger of justice. In the hush of a conversation on Sarah's porch, Whitaker and Miller stood as witnesses to a truth unveiled. "Why me?" Sarah's voice carried the weight of curiosity. "Why choose my address?" Whitaker's gaze, haunted by the shadows of the past, met hers. "The algorithm chose you," he murmured, "an impartial arbiter of fate, leading us to the threshold of truth." The VHS tapes, relics of a bygone era, found their resting place in evidence, a testament to the resilience of truth in the face of darkness. And as the world turned, oblivious to the battles fought in shadows, a whisper lingered, a reminder that sometimes justice arrives in unexpected packages, bearing unfamiliar names, waiting for the curious to unveil its secrets in the stillness of the night. Story 21, the worn envelope tinged with age, bore a fresh stamp, as if just whisked away by the postman's hand. With a delicate touch, the detective unfolded the letter within. Typed in a rushed, erratic font were the words, "I am sorry for what I did." The paper exuded a faint dampness, carrying with it a hint of metallic scent. A reddish smear along its edge drew their attention, not ink, but something more sinister. Detective Sarah Morgan, with precise care, placed the letter into an evidence bag, her gloved hands betraying years of experience in handling such delicate clues. The forensics team confirmed her suspicions the stain was human blood, matching DNA from a long unsolved homicide case that had lingered like a shadow over the department. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had been discovered in her apartment, a tragic canvas of multiple stab wounds. Her laptop missing, notes strewn about, hinting that her demise was tied to an unfinished story. Despite tireless efforts, the case had grown cold until this cryptic letter found its way to the homicide division. Imprinted with few fingerprints, the sender had left only ghostly smudges, suggesting a meticulousness that sent shivers down the spines of the seasoned investigators. The postmark, however, whispered of a new light, a flicker of hope in the darkness. As Morgan gathered her team in the dimly lit briefing room, the air heavy with the weight of unsolved mysteries, she affixed the letter's image at the heart of the investigation board. "This changes everything," she murmured to her colleagues. "Our perpetrator shows remorse." Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner, scrutinized the letter, a skeptic's gaze in his eyes. "Or perhaps it's a ploy, a theatrical display to mock us," he posited. The forensics team traced the unique typewriter patterns to a bygone model, a relic of the past, rare yet not beyond reach. The hunt led them to antique shops, collectors seeking a match to this eerie correspondence. In tandem, they delved into Rebecca's life, uncovering her relentless pursuit of truth, her investigation into a prominent family embroiled in local politics. A web of deceit, a tapestry of secrets unfurling before their eyes. Her boyfriend, Michael Barnes, once a pillar of strength, now cast furtive glances, hands trembling with unspoken truths. Rebecca feared she was being followed, he confessed, a tremor in his voice. I dismissed her concerns, a mistake I can never undo. As the detectives probed deeper, a second letter surfaced, bearing the same typewritten words, the same chilling stain. She delved too deep into the family's secrets, the inheritance, the patriarch's demise, it revealed. I never intended for it to end this way. The trail led to the opulent mansion of the deceased patriarch, where the eldest son, Richard, guarded a trove of antiquities, including vintage typewriters. His alibis faltered under scrutiny, his calm facade cracking under the weight of suspicion. A breakthrough awaited as microscopic fibers on the envelopes pointed to custom stationery belonging to the youngest daughter, Eleanor. A clandestine exchange, a web of betrayal unfurling within the family's walls. A search of Richard's abode unveiled a chamber of horrors, clippings of Rebecca, surveillance snapshots, and the damning typewriter. The blood, a macabre link to the slain journalist. A twist awaited as financial records unveiled a sinister pact between Richard and Michael, a deadly dance of deceit. Confronted, Michael's resolve crumbled. Rebecca unearthed proof of Richard's treachery, his hand in his father's demise, he confessed, a ghost of regret haunting his words. I unwittingly sealed her fate by divulging her findings to Richard. The final puzzle piece emerged in Eleanor's revelation, a clandestine recording, capturing Richard's chilling directive to silence Rebecca forever. As Richard's facade crumbled, his protestations of innocence drowned by a torrent of evidence, justice loomed large. The courtroom bore witness to the unraveling of a meticulously crafted facade, the exposure of a killer's guilt. Rebecca's parents, shadows of grief in the stark light of justice, found solace in the verdict, a bittersweet closure. The blood-stained letters, relics of a dark chapter, nestled in evidence storage, a stark reminder that even the most cunning schemes leave traces. Remorse, whether genuine or feigned, proved the undoing of those who believed in their invincibility. Rebecca Warren's tale resonated through the halls of detective lore, a cautionary tale whispered to new initiates that sometimes the key to unlocking mysteries lies not in high-tech gadgets, but in the echoes of an old typewriter and the haunting weight of a killer's guilt. Story 22: The Unseen Observer. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints held no clue to its existence. Yet beneath the old carpet, a hidden door was unveiled by the curious family. A heavy, rusted handle awaited them, requiring 3 sets of hands to pry it open. From the darkness below, a musty, stagnant air welcomed them, carrying the earthy scent of dampness. Descending the steps, they anticipated storage, but encountered a solitary chair beneath a swaying light bulb. And on the wall behind, a chilling display of photographs depicting them, images captured from within the confines of their very home. The Mercer family had settled into the suburban property amidst the winter's early darkness and barren trees. They admired the 2-story structure with its weathered facade and creaking floors, believing it to possess character and a rich history. Little did they foresee the depth of history entwined within the house, and how tumultuously it would collide with their present. Detective Sarah Connors and her partner arrived at the scene, greeted by the fluttering yellow tape marking the perimeter. Mrs. Mercer's shaken voice had relayed the shocking discovery beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before further exploration," Connors directed, gloving her hands with precision. The forensic team's flashes illuminated the stairway as they meticulously captured the eerie space. The wooden steps groaned underfoot as they descended into a compact basement, resembling a standard bedroom with gray painted walls. In the center stood a solitary chair, secured to the floor, beneath a stark light bulb casting haunting shadows. However, it was the chronological array of 37 photographs that seized their attention. The timestamps on the prints revealed an unsettling timeline, showcasing the Mercer family in candid moments. No signs of forced entry or theft were evident, only a profound invasion of privacy that shattered the family's sense of security. As the investigation unfolded, the dark underbelly of the house's history emerged. Previous owners, each departing within a year, had neglected to disclose the existence of the hidden basement. Interviews and records unveiled a web of deceit and concealment surrounding the property's alterations and ownership transitions. A breakthrough came with the revelation from a contractor who had renovated the house years ago. His denial of the basement's existence clashed with the chilling evidence before them. Further exploration unearthed a memory card hidden in the light fixture, containing hundreds more intrusive images of not only the Mercers, but past inhabitants. The discovery of hidden audio recordings within the basement intensified the horror, revealing an elaborate surveillance network within the house. Connors ordered a thorough search of every nook and cranny, unearthing a concealed monitoring station behind the photographs. A journal belonging to the house's original builder, Edward Kelvin, chronicled his obsession with the families that had resided there. The investigation culminated in the shocking apprehension of Kelvin, who had morphed into a spectral presence within the house's walls. His delusions painted the families as mere players in his private drama, watched but never directly interfered with. The families, including the Mercers, abandoned the property, haunted by the revelation of their unwitting participation in Kelvin's twisted voyeurism. The trial exposed the extent of Kelvin's architectural manipulation, portraying the house as a sinister observatory designed to capture the most intimate moments of its residents. As the property was razed to the ground, the families grappled with the lingering paranoia of being watched within their own homes, questioning if they had ever truly been alone in the shadows. Story 23. In the quiet solitude of the attic, nestled beneath a worn blanket, they discovered it. A porcelain doll, fragile and ancient, with its azure eyes wide and unwavering. Sarah and Michael, the young couple who had recently acquired the Victorian house, were bewildered by the doll's sudden appearance. They brushed it off as just another overlooked relic, a forgotten piece of the past. Yet as night descended and they retired to their bed, a subtle unease settled in the air. The stillness seemed to stretch endlessly, and an inexplicable heaviness lingered. When dawn broke, the doll was no longer perched in the attic. Instead, it sat solemnly at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel in the dim morning light. The house itself whispered of bygone tales, its ornate woodwork and enigmatic allure drawing Sarah and Michael in, oblivious to the shadows of its history. Detective Rachel Winters, on a crisp autumn morning, was summoned to the scene of a chilling discovery. The master bedroom held a grim tableau. The female victim posed unnaturally, her eyes wide with terror, while her male counterpart lay in the hallway, a silent witness to some unseen horror. Rachel observed the meticulous arrangement, each limb bent at precise angles, a macabre mimicry of a doll's posture. As she documented the scene, a sense of foreboding crept over her, a whisper of something malevolent lingering in the air. The investigation unfolded like a sinister puzzle, the threads of the past weaving through the present. Neighbors spoke of shadows flitting behind curtains and ghostly laughter echoing through the night. The forensic team unearthed traces of antique fabrics, delicate fibers hinting at a connection to the doll that now held a sinister presence in the house. Records unveiled a chilling pattern of tragedies haunting the property, each death shrouded in mystery and strangeness. A newspaper clipping hinted at a tragic past a doll maker consumed by grief, his creations imbued with a haunting semblance of life. Sarah and Michael unwittingly stumbled into a web of secrets woven through time, their renovations stirring dormant spirits from the house's depths. A breakthrough came in the form of hidden photographs, revealing the doll maker's eerie collection and the enigmatic doll that seemed to defy reality. Handprints etched in invisible ink traced a spectral path from the attic to the master bedroom, a ghostly trail of porcelain dust and unknown substances. A distant relative of the doll maker whispered of arcane rituals and forbidden knowledge, of spirits bound to inanimate forms and the blurred line between life and death. The investigation veered into the realm of the inexplicable, leaving Detective Winters grasping at shadows and whispers of a malevolent force lurking in the shadows. The case remained unresolved, a haunting specter that defied logic and reason. The doll vanished from custody, leaving a void in its wake, a void that echoed with the pained laughter of lost souls. Detective Winters, burdened by the weight of unsolved mysteries, chose to depart, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and a sealed envelope bearing the image of a haunted past. The new owners, wary of the house's dark legacy, left the attic undisturbed, a silent memorial to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. Yet on nights cloaked in silence, whispers of a spectral presence lingered, a fleeting glimpse of a small figure dancing in the shadows, and the echo of a child's laughter drifting on the wind. Story 24, in the midst of a closing costume shop where old treasures were being sold off, a mysterious mask caught the attention of a woman named Catherine Reed. The mask, delicate yet eerily lifelike, seemed to beckon to her from a dusty shelf. As she placed it on the counter to purchase, the cashier hesitated, whispering, "That's not ours." Perplexed, Catherine checked for a tag, but there was none to be found. With a shrug, she decided to take the mask home. That very night, a soft sound stirred Catherine from her slumber. The whisper of fabric shifting drew her attention, and to her shock, the mask was no longer where she had left it on the dresser. Instead, it sat ominously on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her. The morning light revealed a grim discovery as Catherine's neighbor found her home's front door ajar. Stepping inside, the neighbor stumbled upon a chilling scene that would puzzle investigators for years to come. Catherine lay lifeless on her bedroom floor, the mask mysteriously absent. Detective Morgan arrived at the scene as forensics worked diligently to document every detail. The rhythmic click of shutters accompanied the hushed voices of the investigators. Noting the absence of forced entry, the detective observed the seemingly ordinary setting with a keen eye. A partially open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass, all mundane except for the presence of a woman who would never awaken. The medical examiner, with a somber expression, noted the lack of visible wounds or signs of struggle. Pointing to Catherine's face, frozen in terror, he remarked on the mystery surrounding her demise. Something had terrified her to the point of death. Catherine, known for her expertise as an art appraiser, had a keen eye for authenticity. Colleagues praised her meticulous nature and ability to detect even the subtlest discrepancies. Could her talent have led her down a path to tragedy? A visit to the costume shop revealed a puzzling revelation from security footage. The cashier's confusion over the mask's origin led to inquiries that uncovered a dark history tied to a deceased collector. The shop owner admitted to strange occurrences linked to items acquired from the collector's estate sale. Forensics uncovered microscopic fibers on Catherine's fingertips, hinting at a struggle before her demise. The fibers, a blend of human hair and an unidentified organic material, added a layer of intrigue to the investigation. Similar deaths with a common thread emerged, each victim acquiring a mysterious mask before meeting their tragic end. A retired detective shared insights on ancient symbols hidden within the masks, hinting at a sinister ritual of soul transference. A journal found in Catherine's apartment detailed her growing unease, her research into the mask's dark past, and her chilling realization of the entity's lethal nature. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, the cause of Catherine's death, extreme fear-induced cardiac arrest, was finally determined. Surveillance footage unveiled a disturbing figure leaving Catherine's home, wearing a mask that mirrored her likeness but moved with an unsettling mechanical precision. Despite efforts to locate the missing mask, it resurfaced months later in a distant vintage shop, evading capture once more. The case remained unresolved, shrouded in a veil of mystery and dread. The detective, haunted by Catherine's journal, knew the truth was stranger than official records could convey. The night air whispered of unseen presences as the detective pondered the mask's elusive nature, its hunger for unsuspecting hosts. With a sense of unease, she safeguarded Catherine's journal, a testament to a cycle of darkness that transcended time. The mask, a vessel of malevolence, awaited its next victim, biding its time until it found a new bearer to carry out its sinister legacy. Story 25. The apartment lay dormant for months, untouched by human presence. When the new tenants arrived, their expectations were modest, perhaps a layer of dust, a few abandoned remnants of the past. However, one door remained stubbornly closed, refusing to yield to their efforts. It concealed a secret within, locked from the inside, shrouded in mystery. The landlord, with a sense of trepidation, finally forced the door ajar, anticipating mundane contents within. Yet what they discovered sent a chill down their spines. The walls bore witness to a haunting tale, marred by deep and jagged scratches etched into the wood with fervor. And nestled in the corner, an antiquated flip phone lay dormant, its screen illuminated by a solitary, unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator, had encountered her fair share of unsettling scenes in her career. However, the sight before her now stirred a different kind of unease within her. It wasn't the presence of blood or overt violence that unsettled her. Rather, it was the silent narrative woven by those desperate scratch marks, a tale of confinement, of struggle against unseen forces. "We need forensics here immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently documented the haunting marks on the walls, "and gather all records of the previous tenants." The message on the phone, stark and ominous, simply stated, "I know what you did." The landlord, a figure of nervous energy, recounted how the previous tenant had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid rent. A quiet young woman kept to herself, disappeared around 6 months ago, he muttered, his gaze skirting away from the closet. No trouble, never caused a stir. Forensic analysis unraveled a grim tapestry within the apartment. Blood samples intermingled with the scratch marks on the walls, predominantly matching a single individual, presumably the missing tenant, Emma Caldwell, aged 28, reported absent from her workplace. Yet 2 distinct DNA profiles emerged. One remained a mystery to the databases, while the other belonged to a man who had purportedly met his demise 2 years prior. "This defies all logic," Shaw murmured, her gaze fixed on the perplexing findings. Derek Mercer, a convicted assailant presumed dead in a tragic accident, now left his genetic imprint on the closet walls alongside Emma's haunting scratches. Emma's living space painted a poignant portrait of interrupted existence. Unopened mail gathered dust, a lone coffee mug sat unwashed in the sink, and her bed remained meticulously arranged. Phone records unveiled a pattern of communication abruptly severed, interspersed with a flurry of calls from an unidentified number in the days leading to her disappearance. The sister mentioned a mysterious boyfriend, Officer Reed relayed, no name given, described as intense and private. Surveillance footage captured a fleeting moment, a woman entering the building, shadowed by a figure in a cap, his features shielded from view. The pieces began to align when fingerprints belonging to Derek Mercer surfaced on the closet's interior doorknob. He staged his own death, Shaw concluded, but why and what ties him to Emma? The enigmatic DNA led them to another missing person case, Lynette Porter, vanished 3 years prior, whose likeness had been seen frequenting Emma's abode. A thread emerged as Shaw pieced together the puzzle, tracing Derek Mercer's presence to Emma's life through a tangled web of connections. A remote estate owned by Mercer's family unraveled further horrors. Behind imposing basement doors, they unearthed Lynette Porter alive yet emaciated, trapped in a grim echo of Emma's confinement. "He forced me to witness," she whispered, her gaze vacant, "said I needed to learn the price of defiance." Evidence mounted against Mercer, a trail of journals chronicling his fixation on dominance, photographs of women resembling Emma and Lynette, and damning footage of his cruel machinations. "He thought she would expose us," his voice echoed in the recordings. "No one reveals my truths." The hunt for Derek Mercer spanned jurisdictions, a manhunt fueled by the urgency to thwart his sadistic designs. As forensic psychologists delved into his psyche, a chilling revelation emerged: Mercer didn't thirst for mere death. He craved the agony of entrapment, the slow erosion of hope within confined spaces. Upon his capture at a bus terminal, Mercer bore a new identity and a one-way ticket to a coastal haven. In his possession, tools of torment, a roll of tape, a blade of menace, and a clipping detailing Emma's vanishing act. During interrogation, Mercer exuded a disquieting calmness. "She sent that message herself," he asserted, referring to the cryptic text, "seeking salvation she didn't merit." The trial unveiled the elaborate ruse Mercer had orchestrated to erase his past, adopting the identity of a deceased vagrant matching his likeness. For years he lurked unseen, preying on women reminiscent of his initial victim. Emma's remains eluded discovery, her fate sealed within the confines of that unforgiving closet. The jury swiftly reached a verdict of guilt after a brief deliberation. As the judge pronounced a sentence of lifelong incarceration, Mercer's lips curved into a faint smile, a private satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. At the sentencing, Lynette Porter faced her tormentor with steely resolve. "He ensnared us in darkness, for that's where his soul languishes. But as he withers in captivity, I shall bask in the light." The case spurred revisions in missing persons protocols, emphasizing patterns in relationships and thorough scrutiny of rental properties. Detective Shaw preserved the closet door from Emma's abode in her office, a somber memento of a harrowing struggle for survival etched in those desperate marks. As night descends and the world drifts into dreams, remember that even in the quietest corners, echoes of resilience persist, a beacon of hope against the encroaching shadows of malevolence. Story 26, The Mystery of the Whispering House. She had planned to give the nursery a fresh coat of paint before the baby's arrival. The walls, once a faded blue holding untold stories within their layers, were being transformed by the stroke of her brush. But as the white paint covered the old hue, something unexpected emerged from beneath the faint outline of letters, gradually becoming more defined and clear. A message hidden beneath the surface, slowly revealing itself to her gaze. Don't let it hear you. Her heart skipped a beat as she took a step back, her eyes scanning the room. And there, amidst the fresh paint, were tiny handprints etched on the wall, too high for any child to have reached. The discovery in the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the beginning of a chilling saga that would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had bought the Victorian-style home at a surprisingly low price, unaware of its dark past. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the doorstep, her notebook at the ready. A pregnant woman, her belly swollen beneath paint-splattered overalls, greeted her with a weary look in her eyes, evidence of sleepless nights. Trembling, she recounted finding the hidden message and handprints. The previous owners vanished overnight, she explained. Neighbors said they left hastily, with just a few belongings packed in their car. Detective Klein listened intently as she stepped into the historic home, the floorboards creaking under her weight. In the nursery, she examined the partially painted wall, the cryptic message still visible next to 5 small handprints imprinted in the wet paint. Back at the precinct, the detective delved into the property records. The house had changed hands multiple times in 3 decades, each family staying for a mere couple of years. What was more alarming were the reports of child welfare issues filed by 3 of those families, whispers from the walls, eerie sensations of being watched as they slept. Further investigation revealed that the house had once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who ran an orphanage on the premises. 5 children under her care had disappeared, presumed to have run away. But when Eleanor passed away, a sealed room behind the nursery wall was uncovered, filled with children's belongings but no bodies. As Detective Klein interviewed former residents, a disturbing pattern emerged. Families with children reported strange happenings, toys moving on their own, faint laughter echoing through empty corridors, and mysterious drawings appearing on walls. And always the ominous message hidden beneath layers of fresh paint. A forensic linguist linked the writing to Eleanor Blackwood's handwriting, while the identical handprints pointed to a sinister consistency over the years. The detective's persistence led to a groundbreaking discovery. A radar scan of the basement revealed 5 child-sized shapes beneath the concrete floor, leading to a grim revelation. Beneath the concrete lay the remains of 5 children, each wearing a pendant with their name engraved, a tragic confirmation of their fate. Luminol sprayed in the nursery revealed countless handprints glowing in the dark, a ghostly testament to the children's attempt to escape their prison. Eleanor's journals exposed her macabre intentions, believing she could harness the life force of orphaned children to prolong her own existence. The case closed with a proper burial for the victims, finally acknowledging them as murdered innocents. Yet, an unsettling presence lingered in the house, reaching out through time and paint. The nursery walls were torn down, the whispers silenced but not forgotten. Workers reported eerie encounters, hearing children's voices in the rubble, refusing to return after sunset. The house was condemned, a chapter closed but mysteries unsolved, leaving Detective Klein with a haunting image, the 5 luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a reminder of crimes that transcend time and paint. Story 27, the aged apartment exuded a sense of history, its time-worn walls holding secrets whispered through the creaking heating system and rattling pipes. To the inhabitants, these eerie sounds were simply part of the building's character, nothing out of the ordinary, but for her it was different. One day, a faint yet distinct voice slipped through the vents, not the usual distant murmurs, but a whispered calling of her name. Intrigued and somewhat unnerved, she pressed her ear against the grate, feeling the chill of a cold breath brushing past her cheek. And then, almost teasingly, the voice softly uttered, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the silent emptiness of the abandoned apartment, her focus fixed on the rusted vent cover pried open from the wall. The forensic team moved with precision around her, capturing every detail with their cameras. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace until a foul odor led to the discovery of her remains within the ventilation system. Officer Patel recounted Alina's claims of hearing voices through the vents, dismissed by the building management as mere quirks of an aging heating system. Shaw knelt by the vent, observing the frantic scratch marks surrounding it, evidence of a desperate attempt to escape from within. The pieces of the puzzle began to form a chilling picture. Alina, a beloved kindergarten teacher, had exhibited signs of paranoia before her disappearance, convinced that unseen eyes were watching her and voices were speaking to her through the very walls of her home. Shaw delved deeper, piecing together Alina's unraveling state of mind before her tragic fate. The apartment revealed eerie clues: a chair positioned under the vent, fibers matching Alina's clothing caught in the grating, and a mysterious fingerprint inside the vent cover. Listening to the unsettling audio recordings from Alina's phone, Shaw heard the haunting exchange between Alina and an unseen entity, sending shivers down her spine. As the investigation unfolded, a disturbing pattern emerged. Previous tenants had reported strange occurrences, reinforcing the chilling notion that something malevolent lurked within the building's walls. The superintendent, Harold Weber, appeared calm on the surface, but betrayed a subtle unease when questioned about the history of apartment 4B. Forensics uncovered a concealed passage within Alina's bathroom, leading to a hidden realm between the walls where someone had been living, observing, and whispering. Weber's meticulously kept records and disturbing collection of personal items from tenants painted a picture of a predator hidden in plain sight. Weber's arrest brought a sense of closure, but his cryptic words lingered, hinting at a deeper connection between the building and its inhabitants. The tragic fate of Alina and the revelations of Weber's twisted obsession haunted Shaw, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind seemingly ordinary facades. The trial exposed Weber's chilling reality, his delusions intertwined with a methodical manipulation of his victims. Despite the guilty verdict, Weber's parting words echoed a haunting truth that the whispers of the building would continue, a reminder of the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. Today, the apartment building stands as a silent sentinel, its new owners unaware of the lingering echoes of the past. Residents speak of chilling encounters, whispers in the walls, inexplicable drafts carrying voices, and a sense of unease that permeates the very air. The building's groans and rattles are dismissed as mere quirks, but deep down they sense a presence, a reminder that some secrets are never truly buried.